The autumn rain tapped against the windows of the Mercer home as Roland sat at the kitchen table, his calloused fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee. His military-trained eyes scanned the newspaper, but his mind was elsewhere. "Daddy, look what I found." Roland looked up to see his 6-year-old daughter, Marley, standing in the doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant against her chest. "What's that, sweetheart?" Roland set down his newspaper, giving his daughter his full attention. This was their first weekend alone since Nora had left yesterday for another business trip. "There's a funny red light behind the vent in the living room." Marley pointed back toward the main room. "It keeps blinking. Is it Monster Eye?" Roland felt a slight tightening in his chest, the same feeling he'd had in Afghanistan when things were too quiet. "Let's go see this monster, shall we?" He followed Marley into the living room, where she pointed at the floor vent near the bay window. Roland crouched down, his knees cracking slightly. Through the slats, he could see a small, rhythmically blinking red LED. "Stay back for a minute, sweetheart." His voice remained calm, but his body tensed. He carefully removed the vent cover and peered inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. The small red light was attached to a circuit board connected to what appeared to be a compact explosive device. His years of military training kicked in immediately. "Marley," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline now flooding his system. "Remember our emergency game? The one where we pack really fast?" Marley nodded, her eyes widening slightly. Roland had taught her evacuation protocols disguised as games of habit from his military days that Nora had always called paranoid. "We're going to play that game right now. Go get your backpack, the red one, with the emergency supplies. And grab Ellie." He nodded at the stuffed elephant. "She'll want to come too." As Marley ran upstairs, Roland quickly examined the device without touching it. Military-grade timer. Remote activation capability. This wasn't amateur work, and it certainly wasn't random. Someone had targeted his family with precision that he pulled out his phone, taking several quick photos of the device. Then he moved swiftly, grabbing the go bag he kept in the hall closet, another habit Nora had mocked, and the secure laptop from his office safe. Marley reappeared with her backpack. "I got my important things, Daddy." "Good girl." Roland scooped her up with one arm. "We're going on an adventure. Okay? But we need to leave right now. What about Mommy? She's coming back tomorrow." Roland tightened his grip on his daughter. "We'll call her once we're in the car." He carried Marley out to the garage where his truck was parked. After securing her in the booster seat, he quickly checked under the vehicle for any additional devices. Finding nothing, he started the engine and backed out of the driveway as they turned the corner of their street. Roland glanced in the rearview mirror at the house they'd called home for the past 4 years. His phone buzzed. Nora's face appeared on the screen. Roland hesitated, then declined the call. First, he needed to get Marley somewhere safe. They were 3 miles away when it happened. The explosion wasn't as loud as Roland expected, more of a dull thump that rolled across the quiet neighborhood. But the plume of smoke that rose above the tree line told him everything he needed to know. "Daddy, what was that noise?" Marley asked, clutching her elephant tighter. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart," Roland replied, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Keep playing your game." He pulled into the parking lot of a roadside diner, positioning the truck so he could see both the road they traveled and the main highway. His phone buzzed again. Not Nora this time, but a local news alert. "Explosion reported in Oak Ridge neighborhood. Emergency services responding." Roland dialed a number. "Lionel, it's me," he said when the call connected. "I need your help." "Roland." The librarian's voice was calm as always. "What's happening?" "Someone just blew up my house. I need somewhere secure to bring Marley." There was a moment of silence before Lionel responded. "The cabin. Keys in the usual place. I'll meet you there in 2 hours. Bring your equipment." And Lionel tell no one. Roland ended the call and glanced at Marley in the rearview mirror. She was humming quietly to herself, drawing patterns on the foggy window with her finger. He needed to keep her safe while he figured out who had just tried to murder them. He pulled back onto the road, taking a circuitous route toward the mountains. As they drove, emergency vehicles raced past in the opposite direction, lights flashing against the gray sky. His phone rang again. "Nora, This time, he answered, putting it on speaker. Roland? Roland, are you there? Her voice was tight with what sounded like panic. I just saw the news. There was an explosion at our house. Are you and Marley okay? Roland met his daughter's eyes in the mirror, putting a finger to his lips. We're fine, he said flatly. We weren't home. Oh, thank God. The relief in her voice sounded genuine. They're saying it was a gas leak. I'm coming home right now. Where are you? I'll meet you. Roland's jaw tightened. Not necessary. We're safe. I'll contact you when I know more. Roland, please. I need to focus on driving. Nora. I'll call you later. He ended the call. Was that Mommy? Marley asked. Yes, honey. She was worried about us. Is she coming to the adventure, too? Roland's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, checking for any vehicles that might have been following them. Not right now. It's just going to be you and me for a little bit. By the time they reached Lionel's cabin, Roland had taken 6 different detours and switched license plates, twice using sets he'd hidden in his go bag for emergencies. As Roland parked behind the cabin, out of sight from the main road, his phone buzzed with another news alert. He read it and felt his suspicions confirmed. Initial reports suggest localized explosion. Fire chief questions gas leak theory. The explosion had been too controlled, too precise. This wasn't an accident. Someone had wanted them dead. Lionel arrived 90 minutes later, his ancient Volvo crunching over the gravel driveway. Roland watched from the window, one hand on the gun he'd retrieved from the cabin's hidden safe. Uncle Lionel. Marley rushed to the door as the tall, thin man entered, his arms laden with grocery bags and a battered leather satchel. Miss Marley. Lionel's serious face softened as he set down his bags to give her a proper hug. I brought hot chocolate and those animal crackers you like. While Marley busied herself in the small kitchen, Lionel moved closer to Roland. I passed by your house on the way here. It's not completely destroyed, but the living room and entry are gone. Fire department and police are calling it a gas explosion. It wasn't, Roland stated flatly. I saw the device before we left. Military-grade timer. Remote activation capability. Someone put it there deliberately. Lionel's expression remained impassive, but his eyes sharpened. Who would want you dead, Roland? That's what we need to figure out. Roland pulled out his phone, showing Lionel the photos he'd taken of the device. I'm going back there tonight. I need to salvage what I can before the evidence disappears. By nightfall, Roland had changed into dark clothes and loaded a small backpack with tools. He'd spent an hour with Marley, reading stories and assuring her he'd be back soon. It's a special mission, but not a dangerous one, he told her, tucking her in a bed in the cabin's small loft. And Uncle Lionel makes the best pancakes for breakfast. Better than yours? Marley asked sleepily. Much better. Mine always burn. He kissed her forehead. I love you, sweetheart. The drive back to the house took 40 minutes. Roland parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using the neighbors' yards and tree cover to avoid being seen. The house was cordoned off with police tape, but no officers remained on site. He slipped in through the backyard, assessing the damage. The front of the house was destroyed, but the back rooms remained largely intact. Using a small flashlight, Roland made his way through the kitchen to what remained of the living room. The explosion had been centered exactly where he'd seen the device, calculated to kill anyone in that room, but not level the entire house. This wasn't about destruction of property, it was about elimination of people. Him and Marley. Roland worked methodically, collecting fragments from the epicenter. Among the debris, he found what he was looking for: a partially melted circuit board. Moving to his home office, he found the door had been forced open, though it appeared untouched by the blast. His locked files had been searched, and the secure server where he kept his home security footage had been tampered with, the recordings from the past week completely erased. Only 2 people had the credentials to access that system remotely: himself and Nora. Dawn was breaking as Roland returned to the cabin. Lionel was already awake, his laptop open on the rustic dining table. Find anything? He asked as Roland placed the circuit board fragments in front of him. The security footage was erased remotely. Someone didn't want to be seen entering the house. Roland pulled off his jacket. I need you to analyze these fragments. See if you can trace the components. The sound of small feet on the stairs interrupted them. Marley appeared, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Daddy, you came back." Roland caught her as she jumped into his arms. "I told you I would, didn't I? I always keep my promises. Ellie missed you." She thrust the elephant toward him. She kept talking all night. Roland took the stuffed toy, feeling something hard inside it. Did she? What was she saying? She said, "She has a secret." Marley lowered her voice to a whisper. "Mommy put it inside her before she left." Roland's blood ran cold. Carefully, he felt along the seams of the elephant, finding a small opening that had been recently sewn shut. Inside was a small, hard object. "Marley, why don't you help Uncle Lionel with those pancakes he promised?" Roland suggested, keeping his voice light. "I need to check something in my truck." Once alone, Roland extracted a small flash drive from inside the stuffed animal. Whatever was on it, Nora had wanted Marley to have it or Roland to find it. He connected it to a secure laptop, running virus scans before opening the contents. The drive contained only one folder labeled Insurance, with dozens of encrypted emails. By mid-afternoon, they had access to the correspondence between Nora and someone identified only as a W. The most recent email made Roland's stomach turn. "We only need a few hours. Then it's done. He won't survive, and the girl will frame it as a fire. It's the only way." The timestamp was from the morning Nora left. Roland stared at the screen, a cold rage building inside him. His wife had not only betrayed him, she planned to murder him and their daughter. "EW," he muttered. "We need to find out who that is." "Already working on it," Lionel replied, his fingers moving across the keyboard. "But Roland, you need to prepare yourself. If Nora is involved in this, then she's no longer my wife," Roland finished, his voice like ice. "She's just a target." That night, after Marley had gone to bed, Roland and Lionel spread the contents of the flash drive across the cabin's dining table. Printed emails, financial records, and fragments of conversations told a disturbing story. "Most of these emails are from the last 6 months," Lionel observed, arranging them chronologically. "But there are references to conversations going back almost 2 years." Roland studied a particularly cryptic exchange. "The contingency is in place. If he suspects anything, we implement Plan B. She's been planning this for a long time," he said, his voice hollow. "While I was teaching Marley to ride a bike and planning our anniversary trip, my wife was figuring out how to kill us." Lionel adjusted his glasses. "Not just that. Look at these financial transfers. There's a pattern here. Large sums moving through shell companies, then disappearing into offshore accounts. Money laundering on an impressive scale. Multiple countries, multiple currencies. Whoever EW is, they're professional. This isn't just about eliminating you, it's about covering financial tracks." Roland picked up a printout of one of the earliest emails. Here, Nora mentions the military contract review. That must be connected to her work at Strat SEC. The security contractor, she's been there for 5 years. Advanced to senior strategist last year. Roland's jaw tightened. With access to classified information and international clients. Lionel typed rapidly on his laptop. "If we cross-reference the dates of these transfers with Strat SEC's known military contracts, the computer screen filled with data points, forming a clear pattern of correlation." "There it is," Lionel said grimly. "Every major transfer follows a Strat SEC contract announcement by exactly 14 days. They're skimming for military security contracts. And I was the liability," Roland concluded. "The husband who might notice unexplained income or suspicious behavior." "What about Marley?" Lionel asked quietly. "Why target her too?" Roland's expression darkened. "Insurance. A child's death makes it less likely anyone would suspect the grieving mother." As they worked through the night, piecing together the conspiracy, Roland's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Nora, each one more desperate than the last. He ignored them all, focusing instead on the final email from the flash drive, the one that confirmed his wife's betrayal in her own words. "Everything is set for Friday. The device will activate remotely at 9 p.m. when they're both typically in the living room. The fire should destroy any evidence. By the time they realize it wasn't an accident, We'll be established in the new location with the funds secured. Remember, we agreed quick and clean. No loose ends. No loose ends. That's what his wife and her accomplice had called the murder of a 6-year-old girl. Roland felt something harden inside him, something cold and resolved. Nora had planned meticulously, but so would he. And unlike her, he wouldn't fail. Dawn broke over the mountains as Roland loaded the last of their supplies into his truck. 3 days had passed since the explosion, and it was time to move. Staying in one location for too long was a risk he couldn't afford. "Where are we going now, Daddy?" Marley asked, clutching her backpack to her chest. "To see Aunt Penny," Roland replied, helping her into the booster seat. "She has a special place where we can stay for a while." "What about school? Ms. Wilson will miss me." Roland secured her seatbelt, his heart aching at the normalcy his daughter craved. "We're taking a special vacation. I've already talked to your school." The lie came easily. In truth, he'd contacted no one, leaving no digital footprint that could be traced. As far as the world knew, Roland and Marley Mercer had vanished into thin air after surviving a tragic gas explosion. Lionel approached the truck, carrying a small package. "Burner phones," he said quietly, handing them to Roland. "Untraceable. Check in every 12 hours. Same protocol as before." "What about the Strat SEC angle?" "Working on it. I've identified 3 employees with the initials EW. I'm narrowing it down." Lionel glanced at Marley, then lowered his voice further. "Nora's been making waves. Filed a missing persons report yesterday. Police aren't taking it seriously, yet they figure you're just staying with family after the explosion." "Good. Keep it that way." Roland clapped his friend on the shoulder. "Watch your back. These people don't mess around." The drive to Penny's remote cabin took 4 hours, with Roland taking multiple detours and changing vehicles at a prearranged location. His sister had always valued her privacy, choosing to live off the grid in a secluded woodland property that didn't appear on any official records. When they finally arrived, Penny was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed over her tattooed forearms. At 29, she looked more like Roland than either of them cared to admit. The same watchful eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw. Uncle Roland brought a friend. She called over her shoulder as they approached. From behind the cabin, a woman with close-cropped dark hair emerged, her stance alert but relaxed. Roland recognized her immediately. "Raven," he acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't expect to see you here." Penny called. "Said you needed someone who knows fire." Raven Cole, his former neighbor and ex-firefighter, studied him carefully. "Figure my expertise might come in handy." Inside the cabin, while Penny showed Marley the small art studio where she created her tattoo designs, Roland briefed Raven on the situation. "You're telling me your wife tried to blow you up?" Raven's eyebrows rose. "The same woman who organized that charity auction for the fire department last year. The very same." Roland spread out the evidence he'd gathered. "She and someone at her company are laundering money through military contracts. We were loose ends." Raven studied the emails, her expression hardening. "And they were willing to kill a child to cover their tracks." "What do you need from me?" "Protection from Marley. Someone Nora doesn't know well, but who can handle themselves in a crisis." Roland met her eyes. "I can't be with her 24/7 while I hunt these people down. I need someone I can trust." "You've got it," Raven said without hesitation. "But you should know if they come for her, I won't just be defensive." "I'm counting on that." Roland turned as Penny and Marley returned. "Hey, sweetheart, did you see Aunt Penny's drawings?" Marley nodded enthusiastically. "She's going to teach me how to draw dragons." "Can I, Daddy?" "Please." "Of course." Roland forced a smile. "Why don't you get your coloring things set up while I talk to Aunt Penny for a minute?" Once Marley was occupied, Roland pulled his sister aside. "I need you to teach her more than dragons. The counter-surveillance protocols we learned as kids make them into games she'll remember." Penny's expression grew serious. "She's 6, Roland, and someone tried to kill her 3 days ago." His voice was tight. "I need her prepared, not scared. You know how to do that." That evening, as Roland prepared to leave, Marley grew agitated. "You can't go, Daddy. You promised we'd stay together." Her small face crumpled with fear. Roland knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Remember when we talked about brave knights who go on quests? Sometimes they have to leave the castle to fight the dragon, but they always come back. But what if the dragon gets you? Tears welled in her eyes. Then you'll be safe with Aunt Penny and Ms. Raven. But that won't happen. He tapped her chest, right above her heart. I'll always be right here, even when you can't see me. And I've never broken a promise to you, have I? Marley shook her head, sniffling. Draw what you remember, okay? All the things you've seen and heard, like we practiced. This was more than comfort. It was strategy. Marley's uncanny memory for details had always amazed him. As if understanding, Marley's expression grew solemn, like the black box Mommy gave the man. Roland froze. What man, sweetheart? The tall man who came to our house when you were teaching your class. Mommy gave him a black box and said, "This ends now." Marley tilted her head. She looked sad after. She didn't know I was watching from the stairs. When was this? Roland kept his voice level, though his pulse quickened, before she went on her trip. The day we had pizza for dinner. 2 days before the explosion. Roland met Raven's eyes over Marley's head, seeing his own suspicions confirmed in her gaze. Can you draw this man for me? What'd it look like? Marley nodded. He was fancy, like the men in Mommy's office. As Marley began to draw, Roland pulled Penny aside. I need you to secure this place. Full perimeter alerts, escape routes mapped and rehearsed. Raven stays with Marley at all times. And where will you be? Hunting, Roland replied, his voice cold. Starting with Strat SEC. Lionel's cramped office in the back of the town library smelled of old books and freshly brewed coffee. Maps and printouts covered every available surface, and 3 computer monitors displayed various data feeds. 3 EWs at Strat SEC, Lionel explained, pointing to employee profiles. Edward Winters, accounts payable. Elizabeth Walters, human resources. And Elijah Ward, strategic operations. Roland studied the photographs. Ward, he said finally. I've seen him before. At company functions. I thought so too. Lionel pulled up another screen. His background is interesting. Former military contractor with extensive international experience. Specialized in problem resolution for high-value clients. That's corporate speak for eliminating obstacles, Roland observed. What's his connection to Nora? Lionel hesitated. They're close. Very close. He opened a folder containing surveillance photos. These were taken last month at a hotel in Seattle. Not exactly a business meeting. The images showed Nora and a tall, well-dressed man entering a hotel room, his hand possessively on the small of her back. Roland felt a strange emptiness as he looked at them. Not jealousy or hurt, just confirmation of what he already suspected. So Nora and Ward are lovers as well as business partners. It appears so. Lionel pulled up financial records. And they've been busy. In the past 18 months, approximately $12 million has disappeared through a network of shell companies. The pattern suggests they're skimming from classified military contracts, the ones Nora has been strategizing and Ward has been implementing. Roland studied the money trail. These transfers require dual authentication. Both of them are involved, and they needed you gone because... Lionel brought up a calendar. Because the annual security audit is next month. Roland finished connecting the dots. Strat SEC would be required to open their books completely. Any discrepancies would be flagged. Exactly. They're running out of time to cover their tracks. Lionel clicked through more documents. There's more. Ward has a history of eliminating problems cleanly. 3 whistleblowers at previous companies died in accidents shortly after raising concerns about financial irregularities. Nothing was ever proven. And now, with the next accident, Roland's expression hardened. What about his resources? Does he have people who could help execute something like this? One name keeps coming up. Victor Lang. Lionel displayed the profile of a hard-faced man with cold eyes. Former mercenary, specialized in extraction and elimination. Now works as a security consultant for StratSEC's Special Projects Division. Roland pulled up Marley's drawing, a surprisingly detailed sketch of a tall man in a suit, his features sharp and predatory. Even through a child's eyes, Elijah Ward was unmistakable. We have motive, means, and opportunity, Roland said. Now we need hard evidence that will stand up in court. Enough to bring them both down permanently. That won't be easy. They've covered their tracks well, but not perfectly. Roland pointed to a discrepancy in the financial reports. Every system has weaknesses. We just need to find theirs. They worked through the night, mapping connections and planning their approach. By morning, they had the outline of a strategy. It's not about emotion, Roland explained, pinning locations on a map. It's about precision. We study their movements, identify patterns, create redundant evidence trails, and coordinate with multiple agencies simultaneously. You could just kill them, Lionel observed mildly. With your background, you could make it look like an accident. Roland shook his head. Death is too quick, too clean. I want them to lose everything, their freedom, their reputation, their future. I want them to live with the consequences of what they've done. Revenge served cold, Lionel nodded. It's going to take time. Not too much. Roland checked his watch. They've already made their first mistake. They underestimated me. They'll make more. For 11 days, Roland had methodically built his case against Nora and Ward. While they believed him distracted by grief and confusion, he'd been tracking their movements, documenting their actions, and laying traps to expose their operation. The emotional husband they expected to be paralyzed by betrayal didn't exist. In his place was the cold, calculating tactician his military commanders had valued, a man who understood that emotion was the enemy of precision. The warehouse district stood empty and silent in the pre-dawn light, abandoned buildings looming against the gray sky. Roland moved silently through the shadows, his military training evident in every calculated step. This was the 5th location he'd surveilled in 10 days of property owned by one of Ward's shell companies. Tonight, his patience had been rewarded. Through his binoculars, Roland watched as a black SUV pulled up to the loading dock. 2 men emerged, one he recognized immediately as Victor Lang. They unloaded several metal cases, carrying them inside the warehouse. Roland documented everything, the camera's quiet shutter capturing evidence with each click. His phone vibrated silently. A text from Lionel. Financial transfers complete. $2.3 million moved to Cayman account number 45692. Ward scheduled to access tomorrow. Another piece in place. Roland checked his watch. In 4 hours, Lionel would anonymously transmit the first batch of evidence to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. Not enough to make an arrest, but sufficient to open an investigation. The first domino in a carefully arranged line. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Raven. "Marley's asking for you," she said without preamble when he answered. Had a nightmare about the explosion. Could use her dad. Roland's carefully constructed walls wavered slightly. "Put her on." "Daddy." Marley's small voice came through, thick with tears. "When are you coming back? The bad dreams won't stop." "Soon, sweetheart," he promised, moving away from the warehouse toward his concealed vehicle. "I'm working on making things safe for us." Mommy called Aunt Penny's phone. She was crying. Roland tensed. "Mommy called? When?" "Yesterday. Aunt Penny didn't know I was listening. Mommy said she needed to talk to you right away." She sounded scared. Of course she was scared. Their plan was unraveling, and she knew it. Nora was trying to locate them, perhaps to finish what she'd started or to cover her tracks. "Listen to me, Marley. If Mommy calls again, you don't talk to her, okay? And you tell Aunt Penny right away. Are you mad at Mommy?" The simple question from his daughter cut through his tactical mindset. How did you explain to a 6-year-old that her mother had tried to murder her? "It's complicated, sweetheart. But I promise, when this is all over, I'll explain everything." After reassuring Marley, Roland refocused on his mission. Sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. Back at the small apartment he'd rented under a false name, Roland added the latest surveillance photos to the evidence wall. His phone rang a direct call on his secure line. Only 3 people had this number. "Lionel, what's happened? We have a problem." The librarian's voice was tense. "Someone accessed your old email account. They're trying to trace your movements." "Ward, no." The access point was Nora's laptop. "She's hunting for you on her own." Roland considered this development. "Can you track her?" "Already am. She's staying at the Westlake Hotel downtown, not at your house." She's been accessing Stratesc's secure server after hours, downloading files. She's preparing to run, Roland concluded, or building her own insurance policy against Ward. This was an opportunity Roland hadn't anticipated. If Nora and Ward were no longer fully aligned, he could exploit the division. Keep tracking her, he instructed, and accelerate the timeline on the financial evidence. I want the FBI looking at those accounts by tomorrow. What about Ward's enforcer? If they feel cornered, Lang might become more aggressive in finding you and Marley. Roland's jaw tightened. Let him try. I've faced better men in worse conditions. Change of plans, Roland decided. We're going to give Lang a target he can't resist. The multi-level parking garage in downtown Seattle offered exactly what Roland needed: multiple entry points, limited security cameras, and enough concrete to absorb sound. That he parked on the third level, deliberately selecting a spot partially visible from the main entrance but obscured from security cameras. Then he made a call from the burner phone Lionel had designated as the track device. I have what you want, Roland said when the call connected to Nora's private line. The original drive and all copies. Roland. Her voice was a mixture of relief and wariness. Where are you? We need to talk. Parking garage at Westlake Center. Level 3. 1 hour. He ended the call before she could respond. She wouldn't come alone. That was the point. Roland positioned himself not where he'd indicated, but on the level above, with clear sight lines to his parked vehicle. The waiting was the easy part. Combat had taught him patience, the ability to remain perfectly still for hours while anticipating multiple scenarios. 53 minutes after his call, a sleek black sedan entered the garage. It circled once before parking 3 spaces away from Roland's decoy vehicle. The driver remained inside, engine running. 0.7 minutes later, a second car arrived in Nora's silver Audi. She parked near the entrance, hesitating before getting out. Even from a distance, Roland could see the tension in her posture as she scanned the garage, but it was the third arrival that confirmed his suspicions. Victor Lang, entering on foot from the stairwell, moving with the practiced efficiency of a predator. He positioned himself behind a concrete pillar, his hand inside his jacket where a weapon would be concealed. They'd set a trap. Not realizing they were walking into one, Roland activated the first of his prepared devices, a small electromagnetic pulse that would temporarily disable the garage's already minimal security system and any communication devices within 50 feet. Nora approached the decoy vehicle, calling out tentatively, Roland, are you here? Lang emerged from his position, moving to flank the empty car. It was the moment Roland had anticipated. He triggered the second device, a series of bright flashbangs that erupted around the parked vehicles, disorienting without causing permanent damage. In the confusion, Lang fired 2 shots toward the source of the disturbance, exactly as Roland had predicted. The controlled chaos allowed Roland to move unseen to his pre-positioned exit point. As he slipped away, he activated the final element of his plan, a small camera he'd hidden earlier, capturing Lang's armed presence and unprovoked gunfire in the garage. By the time the garage's security system reactivated, Roland was 3 blocks away, watching through a secure feed as police responded to reports of gunshots. Lang had escaped, but not before being clearly recorded by Roland's hidden camera and by the traffic camera Roland had carefully repositioned that morning to cover the garage exit. His phone buzzed with a message from Lionel. Facial recognition got him. Running it through the system now. The trap had worked perfectly. Victor Lang was now identifiable and on law enforcement radar. More importantly, his aggressive response had confirmed Roland's theory. They weren't just looking to find him. They were still trying to eliminate him. 20 minutes later, Lionel sent the information he'd been waiting for. Got him. Lang operating from warehouse in industrial district. Same one from your surveillance. Sending coordinates. The noose was tightening. Lang had made his first serious mistake, and it wouldn't be his last. The secure call to Nora was arranged through a complex routing system Lionel had designed, making it impossible to trace back to Roland's actual location. Roland? Is that really you? Nora's voice came through, a mixture of relief and anxiety. It's me. He kept his tone neutral, revealing nothing of the cold rage that had settled in his chest. You've been trying to reach me. Thank God. I've been so worried. The police aren't doing anything. They think you're just taking time after the accident. Are you and Marley safe? Where are you? The concern in her voice sounded genuine, which only heightened Roland's disgust. She'd always been convincing. It was what made her so effective in corporate negotiations. We're alive, he said flatly. No thanks to whoever planted that explosive in our living room. A pause. Explosive? Roland, it was a gas leak. That's what the fire department determined. Stop lying, Nora. I saw the device before we left. Another pause, longer this time. If that's true, then someone targeted us. That's even more reason for you and Marley to come home, where I can protect you. Protect us. Roland allowed a hint of his contempt to show. The way you protected the Kingston file? It was a calculated risk or reference to a file that didn't exist. But if Nora was involved in the attempt on their lives, she'd be hypersensitive to any mention of potentially incriminating evidence. Her response was immediate and revealing. What do you know about Kingston? The false warmth had vanished from her voice, replaced by sharp intensity. Enough to understand why someone might want me silenced, Roland replied, watching the recording software track the stress patterns in her voice. The question is, how much does Ward know about your separate arrangements? Ward? Elijah Ward? She attempted to sound confused, but the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. My colleague? What does he have to do with this? You tell me, Nora. You're the one who's been meeting him at the Harborview Hotel every Thursday for the past 4 months. A sharp intake of breath. You've been spying on me? I've been aware, Roland corrected. The same way I'm aware of the $12 million that's been moved through accounts in the Caymans and Singapore. Roland, listen to me. Nora's voice dropped, becoming urgent. You don't understand what's happening. I'm not the enemy here. There are things I need to explain in person, like why you put an explosive device in our home, or why you told Ward that Marley was an acceptable casualty. What? No. The denial seemed genuinely horrified, but Roland had long since stopped trusting his wife's performances. I would never hurt Marley. Never. Roland, you have to believe me. The way I believed you were on a business trip when you were actually setting up our murder. His voice remained calm, but each word was edged with ice. I saw the emails, Nora. We only need a few hours. Then it's done. He won't survive, and the girl will frame it as a fire. Silence stretched between them. How did you get those? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You put them on a flash drive inside Marley's stuffed elephant. Did you have second thoughts? Or was it just another layer of insurance? It's not what you think. Nora's voice had changed again, dropping the pretense of innocence. I needed evidence. Protection. Against who? Your partner? The authorities? Or did you just want to ensure you'd be the last one standing when everything fell apart? You don't know what Ward is capable of, she hissed. What he's forced me to do. I'm trapped, Roland, and I'm supposed to believe you're the victim. Roland's laugh was short and brittle. The same woman who orchestrated a complex money laundering scheme through military contracts, who slept with her co-conspirator while planning her family's murder. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Nora insisted. It started small, just redirecting funds from overinflated contracts. No one was getting hurt. Then Ward wanted more, and when I tried to back out, she trailed off. He threatened you, Roland supplied, watching the conversation's trajectory carefully. He threatened Marley, Nora corrected. Said if I didn't help finish what we started, he'd make sure I lost everything, including her. It was plausible. Ward had the profile of someone who would use threats to maintain control. But it didn't explain the emails in Nora's own words, the careful planning she'd participated in, and the explosive device. Roland pressed. Was that Ward's idea too? A hesitation that told him everything. Roland, please. I need to see you. To explain properly, face to face. So you can finish what you started. So I can protect my daughter. Nora's voice cracked. I made terrible mistakes, but I never wanted either of you hurt. The flash drive, I gave it to Marley because I knew you'd find it if anything happened to me. It was insurance against Ward, not you. Roland had heard enough. Whether Nora was telling a partial truth or crafting another elaborate lie, her involvement was confirmed by her own words. If you want to protect Marley, turn yourself in. Confess everything about the laundered money, Ward's involvement, all of it. They'll arrest me, she protested. I'll lose everything. You already have, Roland stated coldly. The only question now is whether you face the consequences with some shred of dignity or whether you go down with Ward when everything collapses. Roland, one more thing, he interrupted. If anything happens to Marley, if Ward or his people come anywhere near her, I will hold you personally responsible. And Nora? You know what I'm capable of. He ended the call, the threat hanging in the air between them. The conversation had confirmed his suspicions. Nora was trying to distance herself from Ward, possibly preparing to blame him entirely for their crimes. But her slip about the explosive device had revealed her complicity beyond any doubt. Roland forwarded the recorded call to Lionel, adding, "She's running scared. Accelerate the timeline. It's time to end this." The headquarters of Strat SEC occupied 15 floors of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Seattle. On this particular morning, the main conference room on the top floor was set for a major presentation Strat SEC's annual security briefing to potential military and government clients. Perfect timing for what Roland had planned. From his position in a building across the street, Roland watched through high-powered binoculars as the room filled with uniformed officers, government officials, and corporate executives. Nora was there, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her composure betraying nothing of her recent distress. Beside her stood Elijah Ward, tall and confident, his hand occasionally touching her elbow in a gesture that might appear supportive to observers, but which Roland recognized as possessive. Teams in position. Roland asked into his secure comm link. FBI Financial Crimes Unit entering the building now. Lionel confirmed from his position in the surveillance van parked 2 blocks away. 6 agents, plus digital forensics team. They have the warrants for all Strat SEC servers and Ward's personal devices. Interpol, representatives present in the conference as observers. They're coordinating with FBI for the international accounts. Media, Channel 4 investigative team arriving in 3 minutes. Anonymous tip about major financial crimes at a prominent security contractor was too juicy to ignore. Everything was in place. The culmination of 2 weeks of meticulous planning, evidence gathering, and strategic leaks to the right authorities. Activating Phase 1, Roland stated, pressing a button on his laptop. Across the street, the oversized screens in StratSEC's conference room suddenly flickered. Instead of the planned corporate imagery, they showed financial records, email exchanges, and transfer confirmations. All the evidence of Ward and Nora's money laundering operation laid bare before the assembled military and government representatives. Through his binoculars, Roland watched the room erupt into confusion. Ward lunged for the control panel, but it was too late. The system had been locked by Lionel's remote access. Nora's face had gone pale, her practiced composure crumbling as she recognized exactly what was being displayed. Phase 2, Roland instructed, in the StratSEC server room 12 floors below, the carefully planted digital breadcrumbs activated. Every device on the network received the same undeniable evidence that had just been displayed in the conference room. Simultaneously, the same information was transmitted to the personal devices of every board member, major client, and financial partner of StratSEC. FBI team has reached the conference floor, Lionel reported. Interpol agents moving to secure positions. Channel 4 news van just pulled up outside the main entrance. Roland watched as the conference room doors opened and federal agents entered, led by a stern-faced woman in a dark suit. The military representatives were already on their feet, faces tight with anger and shock that Ward's reaction was immediate and desperate. He lunged for his phone, likely to trigger some contingency plan, but one of the FBI agents intercepted him. Nora, instead of resisting, seemed to collapse into a chair, her head in her hands. "Victor Lang?" Roland asked, still watching the scene unfold. "Secondary team apprehended him at the warehouse 30 minutes ago," Lionel confirmed. "They found quite the arsenal, including components matching those from your house." He's not talking, but he doesn't need to. The evidence speaks for itself. Roland allowed himself a moment of cold satisfaction as he watched federal agents handcuff Ward and read him his rights. The cameras from Channel 4 were capturing everything: the arrest, the shocked faces of the military clients, the damning evidence still displayed on the conference room screens. "Nora's being taken into custody," Lionel reported. "She's not resisting." Through his binoculars, Roland caught one last glimpse of his wife as agents led her toward the elevator. For a brief moment, she looked toward the windows, as if sensing his presence across the street. Her expression was a complex mixture of defeat, fear, and something else, perhaps a realization of just how thoroughly she had been outmaneuvered. "It's done," Roland said quietly, lowering the binoculars. "Send the secondary evidence package to the prosecutor's office. I want no chance of technicalities or deals." As he packed away his equipment, Roland's phone buzzed with a message from Raven. "Marley's asking when you're coming home. What should I tell her?" For the first time in weeks, Roland allowed himself to think beyond the mission, beyond revenge. "Tell her I'm on my way," he replied. "We're safe now." The federal courthouse stood like a fortress against the gray Seattle sky, its stone columns and broad steps filled with reporters and curious onlookers. Inside courtroom 3, Roland sat in the back row, anonymous in a dark suit and glasses, watching as Elijah Ward was led in by U.S. Marshals. 2 months had passed since the arrests. 2 months of investigations, evidence compilation, and pretrial hearings. Today marked the beginning of Ward's sentencing after his failed attempt to negotiate a plea deal. Ward looked different now, his expensive suits replaced by prison orange, his confident posture diminished by confinement. Yet his eyes retained their calculating coldness as they swept across the courtroom, briefly meeting Roland's gaze without recognition. The proceedings moved with methodical precision. The prosecutor laid out the extent of Ward's crimes with devastating clarity. "Your Honor, the defendant has been convicted of 27 federal counts, including money laundering, wire fraud, misappropriation of government funds, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder." She gestured to the evidence displays. Through a sophisticated scheme spanning 4 years, Mr. Ward diverted over $12 million from classified military security contracts, placing national security at risk and violating the trust placed in his position. Ward's attorney offered weak counterarguments about cooperation and diminished responsibility. "My client maintains that he was manipulated by his co-defendant, Mrs. Mercer, who had the primary access to these accounts and who—" The judge interrupted, her expression stern. "Counselor, the evidence clearly shows Mr. Ward's digital fingerprints on every transaction. The jury has already rejected this defense." As the sentencing recommendations were presented, Roland noticed Lionel slip quietly into the courtroom, taking a seat beside him. "Interpol just froze the last of his hidden accounts in Macau," Lionel whispered. $3.2 million. His contingency fund is gone." Roland nodded slightly. Another piece of Ward's carefully constructed escape plan dismantled. In the 2 months since the arrest, international banks had systematically cut ties with Ward's network. His assets had been seized. His reputation had been destroyed through meticulously timed media releases detailing not just the financial crimes, but his history of eliminating whistleblowers. "The defendant will rise," Judge Menendez instructed. Ward stood, his handcuffs rattling slightly. "Elijah Ward, this court has rarely seen crimes of such calculation and moral bankruptcy," the judge began, her voice carrying throughout the silent courtroom. "You have abused positions of trust, stolen from taxpayers, placed military personnel at risk through compromised security systems, and attempted to murder a family, including a child, to cover your crimes." Ward's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "It is the judgment of this court that you be committed to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a term of 150 years. You will serve this sentence at the Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, with no possibility of parole." A murmur ran through the courtroom. ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, housed the most dangerous federal prisoners in conditions of extreme isolation and security. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $18 million, representing the stolen funds plus damages. The judge's gaze was unflinching. "Mr. Ward, you have used your intelligence and skills to destroy lives. Now you will spend the remainder of your life contemplating the consequences of your actions. As the marshals led Ward away, his eyes searched the courtroom one last time. This time, Roland allowed their gazes to meet fully, removing his glasses in a deliberate gesture of revelation. Recognition flashed across Ward's face, followed by shock, and then a cold hatred. Roland held the stare without expression until Ward was escorted through the side door. "That's the end of Elijah Ward," Lionel observed quietly as they left the courthouse. "From corporate strategist to supermax inmate. Quite a fall. It's exactly what he deserved," Roland replied, his voice dispassionate. "Someone who would order the murder of a child doesn't deserve daylight or freedom." That night, as Roland reviewed the final media reports on Ward's sentencing, his phone rang. It was Raven. "Marley saw the news," she said without preamble. "One of the kids at school told her that her mom's business friend is going to jail forever." Roland closed his eyes briefly. "What did she take it?" "She has questions. Questions I can't answer for you. I'll be home tomorrow night," Roland promised. "After Nora's sentencing." "Roland." Raven's voice grew serious. "You've gotten your revenge. Ward is finished. Nora will be too. At some point, you need to focus on healing your daughter, not just avenging her." The words struck deeper than Roland wanted to admit. For months, his focus had been singular. Eliminate the threat, punish the betrayal. But Raven was right. Marley needed more than safety now. She needed understanding. "I know," he acknowledged. "One more day, then it's finished." The courtroom for Nora's sentencing was more crowded than Ward's had been. The story of a corporate executive who had conspired to murder her husband and child had captured the public's imagination in a way that financial crimes alone had not. Roland arrived early, taking a seat in the second row where Nora would be certain to see him. This time, he made no attempt to disguise his presence. When the side door opened and Nora entered escorted by female marshals, the room fell silent. She wore a simple gray dress instead of a prison jumpsuit, a small concession from her legal team to present her more sympathetically. Her eyes found Roland immediately, widening with a complex emotion he couldn't fully decipher. He met her gaze steadily, his expression revealing nothing of the storm that had driven him for months. The proceedings began with the prosecution's summary of the case against her. "Your Honor, while Mrs. Mercer has pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for her testimony against Mr. Ward, the gravity of her crimes cannot be understated," the prosecutor began. "She actively participated in the embezzlement of military contract funds. More disturbingly, evidence shows she was not merely complicit in the plot to murder her husband and child, she initiated it." Roland watched Nora's shoulders tense at these words. Her attorney quickly stood. "Your Honor, my client has fully cooperated with authorities. She has expressed profound remorse for her actions, which were influenced by Mr. Ward's coercion and threats." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "The evidence does not support this characterization. Mrs. Mercer's own emails, which she authenticated during testimony, show she suggested the home explosion as the method of elimination." The judge nodded. "Sustained. Continue." The prosecutor displayed a projection of the most damning email, the one Roland had first discovered in Marley's stuffed elephant. Nora's words glowed on the screen. "The device in the living room vent is the cleanest solution. They'll be there for story time at 8. By the time anyone suspects it wasn't an accident, we'll be established elsewhere." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Nora's head bowed, unable to look at her own words. Finally, Nora herself was permitted to speak. She rose slowly, her handcuffed wrists resting on the table before her. "Your Honor," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I cannot undo what I've done. I betrayed my family and violated every principle I claim to uphold." Her voice cracked slightly. "I allowed greed and ambition to corrupt me completely, to the point where I participated in a plan that would have killed my own child." She turned slightly, looking directly at Roland. "No apology can ever be sufficient. No explanation can justify my actions. I can only say that in my darkest moments, I did try to leave evidence that might protect them if I couldn't." Roland's expression remained impassive. The flash drive had indeed been Nora's attempt at insurance, but against Ward, not for her family's protection. The evidence had made that clear. I accept whatever sentence the court imposes, Nora concluded, knowing that no punishment could equal the pain I've caused or the trust I've destroyed. As she sat down, Roland noticed something he hadn't expected: the complete absence of her family. Nora's parents, her sister, her close friends, none were present. In the weeks following her arrest, they had publicly disowned her, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the calculated criminal revealed in court. The judge studied Nora for a long moment before delivering her sentence. "Mrs. Mercer, your guilty plea and cooperation have been considered by this court. However, the premeditated nature of your crimes and the particular betrayal of planning violence against your own child require significant consequences." Nora nodded slightly, her eyes downcast. "You are hereby sentenced to 75 years in federal prison, with mandatory psychological evaluation and treatment. You will serve this sentence at the Federal Medical Center, Carswell, with no possibility of early release." The sentence, effectively life imprisonment for a woman in her late 30s, landed heavily in the courtroom. Nora swayed slightly, but remained standing. "Additionally," the judge continued, "you are stripped of all parental rights regarding your daughter, Marley Mercer. Full and permanent custody is awarded to her father, Roland Mercer." At this, Nora's composure finally broke. A small, wounded sound escaped her as she pressed her handcuffed hands to her mouth. "Mrs. Mercer, the court rarely sees crimes that combine financial greed with such profound betrayal of family. You have lost not only your freedom today, but the right to call yourself a mother." As the marshals moved to escort Nora from the courtroom, she turned toward Roland one last time. Their eyes met across the crowded room, hers filled with tears, his cold and unyielding. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about his feelings toward his ex-wife, whether he could ever forgive her, how his daughter was coping. Roland pushed through them without comment, Lionel running interference at his side. Only when they reached the relative quiet of the parking garage did he speak. "It's done," he said simply. "It is," Lionel agreed. "Ward and Nora will spend the rest of their lives in prison. The money has been recovered. Victor Lang is facing his own charges for the attempted murder and prior crimes." "Now comes the harder part," Roland said, his voice softening slightly. "Helping Marley understand. Rebuilding our lives." As he drove away from the courthouse, Roland felt the weight of the past months beginning to lift. The single-minded focus that had driven him identify the threat, neutralize it, achieve justice had served its purpose. Now he needed to find his way back to being a father first, a protector second. Spring came softly to the mountain cabin that Roland had purchased as their new home. Located 30 miles from the nearest town, with sweeping views of forest and distant peaks, it offered both the security Roland required and the natural beauty Marley needed to heal. 4 months had passed since Nora's sentencing. For months of careful rebuilding, of establishing new routines, of learning how to be a single father to a child who still sometimes woke crying from nightmares about explosions and betrayal. Roland stood on the wide porch, watching as Marley explored the newly planted garden with Penny. His sister had moved into a small guest house on the property, her tattoo business now operating from a converted barn where clients willing to make the journey could find her. Her presence had been crucial in helping Marley adjust to their new reality. "She's getting better with the high places," Raven observed, joining Roland on the porch. She handed him a mug of coffee. "Yesterday, she climbed all the way up to the lookout rock without freezing." Roland nodded. Marley's fear of heights had developed after the explosion, a trauma response they were working through patiently. "The therapist says her progress is remarkable," he replied. "Children are resilient when they feel safe." Raven had become a permanent fixture in their lives as well, initially staying to help with Marley's security, but gradually transitioning to something more: a friend, a support, a potential future Roland wasn't yet ready to fully consider, but no longer automatically rejected. "How about you?" she asked, studying his profile. "Any more of those night walks with your gun?" Roland's mouth tightened slightly. She'd caught him twice in the early days, patrolling the perimeter of their property at 3 a.m., checking security systems that were already state-of-the-art. Not for a few weeks, he admitted. The new medication helps. The PTSD diagnosis had come as no surprise. Between his military background and the recent trauma, the nightmares and hypervigilance were almost inevitable. What had surprised him was his willingness to accept treatment, something he would have rejected before Marley. For her, he had learned to acknowledge his own wounds needed healing too. Penny's planning a camping trip next weekend, Raven mentioned. Just up to the North Ridge. Short hike, one night under the stars. Marley's excited about it. Roland smiled slightly. The survival training continues. More like the being a normal kid training, Raven corrected gently. Though Penny did mention teaching her to identify edible plants and build a proper fire. Good skills to have, Roland asserted, but without the intensity that would have colored such a statement months ago. They watched as Penny showed Marley how to plant wildflower seeds along the garden border, the child's delighted laughter carrying across the spring air. She's drawing again, Roland said after a moment. Not just memories of before. New things. Future things. Later, after Marley had gone to bed with her new books, the adults gathered in the living room. Lionel placed a folder on the coffee table. Ward's appeal was rejected, he reported. Unanimously. The evidence was too overwhelming. He'll remain at ADX Florence for the rest of his life. Roland nodded, unsurprised. And Nora? Lionel's expression grew more complex. She's cooperating with ongoing investigations into Stratesi-C's other operations. Apparently, there are more illegal activities than even we uncovered. In exchange, she's been transferred to a medium-security facility. Roland's jaw tightened. Is there a chance of reduced sentence? No, Lionel assured him. The terms of her plea deal were explicit. No matter how much she cooperates, the minimum 75 years remains in place. She'll never be free. 8 months after the sentencing, life had settled into a new kind of normal. Roland had established a small security consulting business he ran from home, allowing him to remain present for Marley while using his skills productively. Penny's tattoo studio had gained a reputation that brought clients from across the state. Raven had taken a position with the local fire department, her apartment in town gradually emptying as more of her belongings migrated to the cabin. It was during one of Lionel's regular visits that he brought the package. This came through official channels, Lionel explained, placing the sealed envelope on Roland's desk. Fully screened and cleared by prison authorities. From Nora. Roland stared at the envelope, his expression guarded. What is it? I don't know. They checked it for anything dangerous, but they don't read legal correspondence. After Lionel left, Roland remained at his desk, the unopened envelope before him. Part of him wanted to burn it unread. Nora had lost the right to communicate with him the moment she planted that explosive device in their home. But another part, the tactician, the strategist, knew that information was always valuable, regardless of its source. Finally, he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single document, an unsent letter from Nora to Elijah Ward, dated 2 days before the explosion. It had been authenticated by the prison authorities, who had verified it against other samples of Nora's writing from Stratesi records. Roland began to read, Elijah, I can't go through with this. Not the way you want. Roland deserves the truth, not an accident that takes away his life and his daughter's. I agreed to the financial arrangements, the manipulated contracts, even our relationship, but I never agreed to murder. Especially not Marley. That I know what you'll say, that it's too late, that we're too deeply involved, that there's no way out now except forward. But there has to be another option. Roland is many things, but he's not unreasonable. If I explain, if I offer to return what we've taken, I don't expect you to understand. You've never had a child. You've never watched someone trust you completely, the way Marley trusts me. I can't betray that trust, not even for you, not even for what we've planned, that I'm not backing out of our financial arrangement. I still want the life we've discussed, but I need to do this my way. I need to at least give Roland the chance to understand before we disappear that I know you won't like this. I know you'll say I'm being weak, but some lines shouldn't be crossed, even by people like us. And Roland set the letter down, a complex mixture of emotions churning inside him. If this was genuine and the authentication suggested it was, then Nora had experienced second thoughts before the explosion. Not enough to stop it, not enough to warn him, but enough to express doubt. Did it change anything? The device had still been planted. The plan had still gone forward. Whether Nora had momentary qualms or not, she had chosen Ward and money over her family's lives. Roland carefully returned the letter to its envelope and walked to the fireplace. The rational part of him argued that the document should be preserved, filed away with the other evidence. But something deeper, something raw and human needed the finality of its destruction. He watched as the paper caught flame, curling and blackening before dissolving into ash. Whatever momentary hesitation Nora might have felt, whatever belated conscience had prompted her to write those words, it changed nothing about what she had done. It earned her no forgiveness. Justice had been served. That would have to be enough. The sound of laughter from outside drew his attention. Through the window, he could see Marley and Raven returning from their hike, both of them carrying small baskets of wildflowers and berries. Marley was talking animatedly, her hands moving to illustrate whatever story she was telling, while Raven listened with genuine interest. This was what mattered now. Not Nora's too-late regrets or Ward's imprisonment, but the life they were rebuilding from the wreckage of betrayal. The community center hummed with activity, the spring festival bringing together families from across the county. Bright banners hung from the rafters, local artisans displayed their crafts at wooden booths, and children darted between attractions with the boundless energy of youth. Roland stood near the refreshment table, watching as Marley participated in a group art project. At 7.5, she had grown taller, her face losing some of its baby roundness. But it was the change in her demeanor that marked the true passage of time, the easy smile, the confident way she interacted with other children, the absence of the haunted look that had shadowed her eyes for so long after the explosion. "She's thriving," Raven observed, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Roland. "Ms. Henderson says she's one of the most engaged students in her class." Roland nodded, accepting the coffee. The nightmares have almost stopped, just one in the past month. It had been nearly a year since the sentencing, 15 months since the explosion that had shattered their old life. Healing had come in small increments. Marley's first genuine laugh, her willingness to sleep with the light off, her ability to talk about Nora without dissolving into confusion and tears. "Any word on the appeal?" Raven asked, her voice low. "Denied." Again, Roland's expression remained neutral. Nora's attorney tried to argue that new evidence suggested she was under duress, but the judge didn't buy it. "Good." Raven's response was simple but firm. In the months since moving into the cabin, she had become Marley's fiercest advocate, a blend of protector, teacher, and maternal figure who asked no quarter for those who had harmed the child she'd come to love. Across the room, Penny was demonstrating henna designs at her booth, a line of eager teenagers waiting for the intricate temporary tattoos. Lionel sat nearby, ostensibly monitoring the book exchange table, but actually keeping a watchful eye on the entire gathering, old habits of surveillance dying hard among their unusual family unit. "Daddy, look what I made." Marley came running over, holding up a colorful piece of artwork, a woodland scene with a cabin, surrounded by figures that represented their household. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Roland praised, genuinely impressed by the detail. "Is that all of us at the cabin?" Marley nodded enthusiastically. "That's you and Ms. Raven, and Aunt Penny with her tattoo stuff, and Uncle Lionel with his books. And that's me and Felix in the middle." Felix, the new puppy that Penny had brought home 2 months ago, claiming it was for security, but clearly intended as therapy for Marley. The German Shepherd mix had quickly become Marley's constant companion. As the afternoon progressed, Roland found himself drawn into community conversations, discussing security improvements for the local school, offering advice on wilderness safety for the summer camping program. Slowly, carefully, he was reintegrating into a world beyond the tight circle of protection he had drawn around Marley and himself. Later, as they prepared to leave, Marley ran ahead to where Penny was packing up her booth, eager to help her aunt carry supplies to the car. Roland and Raven followed at a more measured pace. "You could have killed them," Raven observed quietly, continuing a conversation they had circled around before but never fully addressed. With your skills, your contacts, no one would have known. Roland watched Marley laughing with Penny, the sound carrying across the community center. This was worse for them, and better for us. Raven studied his profile. Because they have to live with it. Because we do. Roland turned to meet her gaze. Death would have been quick. Final. This way, justice continues every day they wake up in those cells. And Marley gets to grow up knowing that systems can work, that bad actions have consequences that fit the crime. Not revenge, but justice. Raven nodded slowly. I think I understand. Besides, Roland added, his voice taking on a hint of the coldness that emerged whenever he discussed Nora and Ward. Living with loss is harder than dying. They lost everything: freedom, reputation, future. I wanted them to feel that loss every day, the way they intended us to feel nothing ever again. Daddy, can we get ice cream on the way home? Marley called, running back toward them with Felix's leash in hand, the puppy bounding alongside her. Roland smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it rarely had before. I think that's an excellent idea. As they walked toward the parking lot, Marley skipping ahead with the puppy, Roland felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with vengeance and everything to do with the future they were building. They didn't just survive. They finished what others had started, and they remembered not just the betrayal, but the strength they had found in its aftermath. That it was enough. It was everything. The afternoon sun beat down on Callum Mercer's broad shoulders as he pushed his 5-year-old daughter Ivy on the swing set. His back ached from leaning under the hood of a Chevy truck for most of the day, and his muscles protested with each push. The neighborhood park sat empty on this Tuesday afternoon, just the way he liked it. No other parents to make small talk with, no other kids for Ivy to compete with for the swings. Just the two of them under the Texas sky, the air still heavy with summer heat despite it being late September. After a 10-hour shift at Mike's auto shop, his hands were still stained with grease despite the thorough scrubbing he'd given them. The black lines etched into his calloused palms had become a permanent feature over his 15 years as a mechanic. He'd changed into a clean gray t-shirt before picking up Ivy from kindergarten, but the smell of motor oil still clung to him, mixing with the scent of cut grass from the park. "Higher, Daddy." Ivy squealed, her blonde pigtails bouncing with each push. Her small hands gripped the chains so tight her knuckles whitened, but her face showed nothing but pure joy. Callum smiled, his weathered face softening at the sound of her laughter. The lines around his eyes, usually furrowed in concentration as he worked, relaxed as he watched his daughter soar through the air. This right here was why he worked so hard. For these moments. For her future. For the college fund that grew a little each month. For the stability he'd never had as a kid. "Hold on tight, kiddo," he warned, giving her another gentle push. His rough palms connected with her back. Careful not to push too hard. He glanced at his watch. 4:30 p.m. He had promised to have dinner ready by 6 o'clock when Marin got home from her shift at the local diner. 10 more minutes, then we head home, okay? Ivy didn't respond. The swing slowed as her small legs stopped pumping. The happy energy that had surrounded her moments ago evaporated like morning dew under the Texas sun. "Ivy," Callum moved around to face her, concern creasing his brow. "You okay, sweetheart?" Her small face had crumpled, eyes downcast as she dragged her feet in the wood chips to stop the swing completely. Her bottom lip trembled, and Callum felt that instinctive fatherly panic rise in his chest, the one that appeared whenever his daughter showed signs of distress. "Daddy, are you going to leave me too?" Her voice was so small he almost didn't hear it over the distant hum of traffic beyond the park. The Callum's brow furrowed. He knelt down in front of the swing, his knees popping from years of crouching beside engines. The wood chips dug into his jeans as he placed his hands gently on her knees. Her question had come from nowhere, like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. "Leave you? Why would I leave you?" Ivy wouldn't meet his eyes, fidgeting with the hem of her pink dress, the one with the strawberries that she insisted on wearing at least twice a week. "Mommy said we're getting a new daddy." The words hit Callum like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "A new daddy?" What the hell was Marin telling their daughter? The world around him seemed to dim, the cheerful park fading as his mind struggled to process what he'd just heard. Ivy. He kept his voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. Years of handling emergencies at the shop had taught him how to stay calm when everything inside him wanted to explode. What exactly did Mommy say about new daddy? She shrugged her tiny shoulders, her eyes still fixed on her light-up sneakers. She was talking on the phone. She said I might get a new daddy soon. Callum's jaw clenched so tight he could feel his teeth grind together. He'd noticed Marin being distant lately, always on her phone, staying out later than her shifts required. Her excuses about helping close up or inventory had seemed plausible enough for a man who trusted his wife. But this was something else entirely. "And you don't want a new daddy?" he asked, trying to keep the tension from his voice, struggling to make this sound like a normal conversation while his world tilted on its axis. Ivy's lower lip trembled more violently now, and tears welled in her blue eyes. Marin's eyes, he'd always thought. "I don't like him, Daddy. He's mean." Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if sharing a dangerous secret. "He tried to hurt me." Everything went cold. The warm Texas afternoon vanished, replaced by an icy dread that spread through Callum's veins. A dangerous stillness settled over him, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm tears through the plains. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Who tried to hurt you?" "The man who comes over when you're at work." Ivy's words tumbled out faster now, like she'd been holding them back for too long. "He's big and loud. He smells funny, like those bottles you don't let me touch." She meant alcohol. "One time I spilled my juice, and he grabbed my arm really hard." Tears filled her blue eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. "It hurted, Daddy. He called me a stupid little." She didn't finish, but Callum could fill in the blank. His heart pounded against his ribs, so hard he thought it might crack bone. Someone had put their hands on his daughter, in his house, while he was busting his ass at work. The rage that flooded him was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, white-hot and all-consuming. "Can I see, baby?" he asked gently, his voice a stark contrast to the violent thoughts racing through his mind. The effort it took to keep his tone even made sweat bead on his forehead. Ivy pulled up the sleeve of her dress, revealing her small upper arm. There, marring the soft skin, was a faint bruise, yellowing now, but still clearly visible. 5 fingerprints, clear as day. A large hand had grabbed her, squeezed hard enough to leave marks. Callum studied it, memorizing the size, the shape, the placement. Evidence. His mechanic's eye, trained to notice details, to spot what was wrong, cataloged everything about the injury. "When did this happen, Ivy?" He kept his voice gentle, stroking her hair with a hand that wanted to form a fist. Getting angry now would only scare her, and that was the last thing she needed. "Last week," she said, pulling her sleeve back down as if hiding the evidence could erase what happened. "When you were working on that big truck, the Peterson job." He'd been at the shop until nearly midnight, 3 days straight last week, rebuilding the transmission on a work truck that the owner needed back ASAP. Marin had said she'd switch shifts with a co-worker to be home with Ivy. Another lie. The pieces started to fit together in Callum's mind, creating a picture he couldn't bear to look at but couldn't turn away from either. Marin's late nights, the sudden password on her phone, the way she avoided his touch in bed. And now, this a man in his house, with his daughter, leaving bruises on her perfect skin. Callum stood up, lifting Ivy from the swing and setting her on his hip. She immediately wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. He could feel her tears dampening his shirt, and it broke something inside him even as it hardened his resolve. "Am I in trouble?" she whispered, her breath warm against his neck. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong," he assured her, stroking her hair, fighting to keep his arms gentle around her when everything in him wanted to hold her tight and never let go. "You did the right thing telling me." As they walked to his pickup truck, Callum's mind raced through possibilities, plans, consequences. The mechanic in him approached the problem methodically. Identify the issue, gather information, fix what's broken. But this wasn't an engine. This was his family, or what was left of it. That he buckled Ivy into her booster seat, checking the straps twice like he always did. His hands moved automatically while his mind churned with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, how dare anyone lay a hand on his daughter? He slid behind the wheel, and his knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel. The urge to drive straight home and wait for this mystery man to show up was almost overwhelming. But that wouldn't solve anything. He needed to be smart about this. Needed to protect Ivy first. Daddy. Ivy's voice pulled him back from the edge of his rage. He met her eyes in the rearview mirror, those innocent blue eyes that trusted him completely. You won't let the mean man hurt me again, right? Callum held her gaze, making a promise he intended to keep with every fiber of his being. Never again, princess. I promise. As he drove home, the familiar streets of their small town passing by in a blur, plans already forming in his mind, he made a silent vow. Whoever had touched his daughter would pay. And Marin? She'd made the biggest mistake of her life. The truck's engine rumbled beneath them, a sound that had always brought Callum comfort. Today, it felt like a countdown, ticking away the hours until his world would change forever. The modest brick house on Maple Street looked just like it always did as Callum pulled into the driveway. 2-bedroom, 1 bath, with a small yard he kept neatly trimmed each Sunday without fail. The American flag hung by the door, and flower beds lined the walkway, mums just starting to bloom in rich autumn colors. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs, or so he'd thought. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, studying the home he'd worked so hard for. They'd bought it 5 years ago, just before Ivy was born. The mortgage payments were steep, but Callum had never missed one. He'd installed the ceiling fans himself, painted every room, fixed the leaky roof last spring. All to give his family a safe place to live. What a fucking joke. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Ivy asked, already unbuckling her seatbelt with practiced fingers. Sure thing, kiddo, Callum replied, forcing a smile he didn't feel. He needed to act normal for her sake. Inside, a storm was brewing, but he wouldn't let her see it. Ivy ran inside ahead of him, her earlier fear seemingly forgotten as she headed straight for her toys in the living room corner. The resilience of children, how quickly they could bounce back. Callum stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the living room with new eyes. The worn brown couch where he collapsed after long shifts. The small TV they'd saved up for last Christmas. The family photos on the wall, Marin with her arm around him, both of them smiling at Ivy's 4th birthday party. Her blonde hair catching the sun, his arm protective around her waist. The happy family. The lie they'd been living. The clock on the wall read 5:10 p.m. Marin wouldn't be home for almost an hour. Plenty of time to start dinner and to look for evidence. Ivy, why don't you watch some cartoons while I make dinner, he suggested, turning on her favorite show. The colorful characters immediately captured her attention, giving Callum the freedom to move through the house unquestioned. He went to their bedroom first, closing the door quietly behind him. The bed was made, Marin's doing. He never bothered when he was the last to leave in the morning. Her perfume lingered in the air, the same vanilla scent she'd worn since they'd met. Once, it had driven him crazy. Now it just turned his stomach. Callum checked Marin's nightstand first, sliding open the drawer. Nothing unusual, just her reading glasses, some hand cream, a paperback romance novel. Her side of the closet, clothes, shoes, nothing out of place. He ran his hands along the top shelf, behind the stacks of sweaters, seeking anything hidden. Nothing. He checked under the mattress, behind the dresser, in every place he could think someone might hide evidence of an affair. The jewelry box her mother had given her nothing but the earrings he'd bought her for their anniversary and her grandmother's pearls. The shoebox at the back of the closet, just old photos and birthday cards. Frustration mounted as he found nothing concrete. Was he wrong? Was Ivy confused? But those bruises couldn't be explained away. And the new daddy comment? A 5-year-old wouldn't make that up. The bathroom was his next stop. He rifled through the drawers, finding only the usual toiletries. It wasn't until he checked the bathroom trash that he found something. Buried beneath tissues was a receipt from the liquor store 3 days ago when Marin had claimed to be working late. 2 bottles of wine and a pack of cigarettes. Marin didn't smoke. Never had. Callum stared at the receipt, a muscle twitching in his jaw. More evidence. More lies. He pocketed the receipt and continued his search, moving into the kitchen to start dinner as promised. Water for the pasta. Ground beef from the fridge. Onions, garlic, the sauce Ivy liked. His hands moved automatically through the familiar motions while his mind processed what he knew. Someone was coming to his house when he was at work. This person had hurt Ivy. Maren was telling their daughter she might get a new daddy. Maren was lying about her schedule. Maren was buying cigarettes for someone. It wasn't much to go on, but it was enough to know his marriage was a sham. He chopped the onion with more force than necessary, the sharp knife coming down against the cutting board with precise, angry cuts. How long had this been going on? Had she ever loved him, or was he just a paycheck, a father for her child, a fix-it man for the house? The questions burned in his mind as he stirred the sauce, the rich smell filling the kitchen while bitterness filled his heart. That'd be why the time he heard Maren's car pull into the driveway. Dinner was ready, and Ivy was setting the table with the plastic plates. She loved the ones with different zoo animals on them. Callum had decided not to confront Maren yet. He needed more information and a plan. Rushing in without thinking would only make things worse. The front door opened, and Maren's voice called out, "Something smells good." She walked into the kitchen, wearing the blue uniform from the diner, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. A smudge of what looked like ketchup stained the front pocket. She looked tired, but then she always did after shift points 7 years ago, when they'd met at his friend's barbecue. That smile had made his heart race. She'd been the prettiest girl there, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm when she talked. He'd fallen hard and fast, proposed within 6 months. Now, all he felt was disgust. "Just spaghetti," he answered, keeping his voice neutral as he filled Ivy's cup with apple juice. "How was work?" "Busy," she sighed, dropping her purse on the counter. She bent to kiss Ivy's head, then reached for Callum, aiming for his cheek. He turned away, pretending to check the garlic bread in the oven. "Dinner's ready. Better eat while it's hot." If Maren noticed his coldness, she didn't comment. She washed her hands at the sink, then sat down at the table, immediately reaching for her phone. "No phones at dinner," Ivy said seriously, parroting the rule Callum had established months ago. "Right, Dad, right," Callum agreed, his eyes fixed on Maren. "Family time is phone-free." Maren hesitated, then put her phone face down beside her plate. "Of course, sorry." Throughout dinner, Callum watched her. The way she kept glancing at the silent phone. The way she barely made eye contact with him, focusing instead on her plate or on Ivy. The way she asked Ivy surface-level questions about her day without really listening to the answers. "Did you have fun at school today?" she asked, twirling spaghetti around her fork without much enthusiasm. "We painted pictures of our families," Ivy said through a mouthful of pasta. "I made one of you and me and Daddy." "That's nice, honey," Maren replied, her eyes darting to her phone as it lit up with a notification. "Teacher said we have to bring something special for show and tell on Friday." Ivy continued, oblivious to her mother's distraction. Maren murmured, clearly not listening. Callum felt his anger building again. Even now, she couldn't be bothered to pay attention to their daughter. He took a sip of water, then decided to test the waters. "Ivy mentioned something interesting at the park today," he said casually as he twirled pasta onto his fork, watching Maren's face carefully. Maren glanced up, wariness flashing in her eyes for just a moment. "Oh," she said, "something about a man coming over when I'm at work." He kept his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. His eyes never left her face, cataloging every micro-expression. The color drained from Maren's face, but she recovered quickly, reaching for her water glass with a hand that trembled slightly. "Oh, that must have been the plumber. We had that leak last week, remember?" Callum nodded slowly, pretending to accept this explanation. "Right, the leak. There had been no leak, no plumber." Another lie to add to the growing pile. Strange, though, she seemed scared of him. "Kids get scared of strangers," Maren shrugged, focusing intently on cutting a meatball in half. "It's normal, maybe." Callum took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving her face. "But bruises aren't normal, are they?" Maren's fork clattered against her plate, and Ivy looked up, startled by the sudden noise. "What bruises?" Marin asked, her voice unnaturally high. Ivy, go brush your teeth and get your pajamas on, Callum said gently, dropping a kiss on top of her head. I'll be in to read you a story in a minute. But I'm not done, she protested, pointing to her half-full plate. You can finish tomorrow. It's getting late, Callum insisted, his tone brooking no argument. Once Ivy had left the room, grumbling about not being tired, Callum leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. She has bruises on her arm. Finger marks. She says your friend grabbed her when she spilled her juice. Marin's eyes darted to the hallway, then back to Callum. She's making it up. Kids fall all the time. Don't. Callum's voice hardened, the single word carrying the weight of his rage. Don't you dare call our daughter a liar. I'm not saying she's lying, exactly, Marin backpedaled, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear nervously. Just that kids exaggerate. They confuse things. 5 fingerprints aren't a confusion, Callum countered, his knuckles white around his water glass. Marin pushed her plate away, food barely touched. Look, I don't know what she told you, but you're overreacting. There's no mysterious man, no bruises. Then explain this. Callum took out his phone, showing her a photo he'd taken of Ivy's arm while she was watching cartoons. The bruise was clearly visible, unmistakably in the shape of adult fingers. Marin stared at the photo, then looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Like I said, kids fall. 5 fingerprints, Marin. Callum put the phone down with deliberate care, the control in his movements masking the chaos in his mind. That's not from a fall. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. I don't have to listen to this. I work all day, I come home tired, and now you're accusing me of what exactly? I haven't accused you of anything. Yet, Callum remained seated, his voice deadly calm. The calm before the storm. But I will find out what's going on in my house when I'm not here. Count on it. Marin fled the room, muttering about needing a shower. The bathroom door slammed, and moments later, Callum heard the water running. He cleared the table mechanically, scraping plates into the trash, loading the dishwasher, wiping counters. Normal actions for a life that was crumbling around him. His mind raced as he worked. Her reaction told him everything he needed to know. She was hiding someone, and she was desperate to keep it hidden. The receipt, the bruises, Ivy's comments, Marin's lies had all pointed to one conclusion. An affair. A dangerous one that when the kitchen was clean, Callum went to Ivy's room. She sat on her bed in her favorite pajamas, the ones with unicorns, clutching her stuffed rabbit named Hoppy. Her damp hair smelled of the strawberry shampoo she insisted on using, and her cheeks were pink from the warm water. Ready for your story? He asked, sitting beside her on the bed that seemed too small for his large frame. She nodded, handing him the book she'd chosen, the one about the bear family they'd read 100 times before. He read it with all the character voices she loved, maintaining the routine despite the turmoil in his heart. When he finished, he tucked her in with extra care, pulling the covers up to her chin. Daddy, she whispered as he was about to turn off the lamp. Can you leave the nightlight on? Of course, princess, he said, switching on the star-shaped light that cast a soft blue glow across the room. No bad dreams tonight, okay? Okay, Daddy. She yawned, clutching Hoppy tight. I love you bigger than the sky. I love you bigger than the whole universe, he replied, their nightly ritual unchanged despite everything. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, letting it calm the storm inside him. When he returned to the living room, Marin was on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. Her hair was wet from the shower, and she'd changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt. She didn't look up when he entered. We need to talk, he said, sitting in the armchair across from her rather than beside her on the couch. Not now, Cal. I'm tired. She didn't meet his eyes, her thumb continuing to scroll through whatever she was looking at. Who is he? Callum asked directly, done with games, done with lies that Marin's head snapped up, her eyes wide. What? The man who comes here when I'm working. Who is he? Callum kept his voice level, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath his words. She laughed, but it sounded forced, brittle. There's no... You're being paranoid. Am I? Callum leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Ivy said you told her she's getting a new daddy. That sounds pretty specific for a 5-year-old to make up. Marin's face flushed with anger, two bright spots of color on her cheeks. You're going to believe the imagination of a child over your own wife? Real nice, California. When my child has bruises and is afraid of a man who comes to our house. Yeah, I'm going to believe her. Callum stood up, too restless to remain seated. I've got an early shift tomorrow. I'll sleep on the couch tonight. Marin didn't protest. She didn't beg him to stay in their bed. She didn't even look at him as he grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and a pillow from their bedroom. Her lack of reaction was its own kind of confirmation. As he lay on the too small couch, staring at the ceiling fan slowly rotating above him, Callum knew sleep wouldn't come easily. The evidence was mounting, but he needed more. Needed to see for himself exactly what was happening in his house when he wasn't there. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would find out the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. The next day dragged by at the shop. Callum went through the motions, oil changes, brake checks, a timing belt replacement, but his mind was elsewhere. On Ivy, on Marin, on the unknown man who had dared to hurt his daughter. During his lunch break, he made a call to Mike, his boss. Need to leave early today, Mike. Family stuff, he said, keeping it vague. Everything okay? Mike asked, concern evident in his gruff voice. In the 15 years Callum had worked for him, he'd rarely asked for time off. I'll figure it out, Callum replied. Just need to take care of something. Take what time you need, Mike assured him. Thompson can finish that Honda you're working on. When afternoon came, Callum cleaned his tools meticulously, wiped the grease from his hands, and changed into the clean shirt he kept in his locker. He needed to set the stage properly to AT home. He made a show of getting ready for an evening shift. Going back in tonight, he told Marin, who sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. Peterson wants his truck done by tomorrow morning. I thought Thompson was helping with that, she said, not looking up. The fact that she knew Thompson's name, knew the details of his work schedule, might once have pleased him. Now it just reminded him how many lies he'd been telling her over dinner each night, sharing the mundane details of his day while she was planning. What, exactly? To replace him? He is, but there's still plenty to do. Callum shrugged, grabbing his keys. Don't wait up. She nodded absently, already back to her phone. Ivy has a play date at Jessica's. I'll pick her up at 7. Good. Ivy would be safe, away from whatever might happen tonight. Instead of heading to the shop, Callum drove around the neighborhood for 20 minutes, giving Marin time to believe he was gone for the night. Then he parked his truck a block over on Elm Street, where he had a clear view of his driveway and front door. The large oak tree provided enough shade to keep him hidden as he settled in to wait, watching as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. A neighbor walked his dog past Callum's truck, nodding a greeting without recognizing him in the fading light. Children played in a yard across the street, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Normal life continuing while Callum's hung in the balance. At 8:15 p.m., Marin's car backed out of the driveway. Off to pick up Ivy, he assumed. He watched her drive away, wondering if she'd bring their daughter home to the man who had hurt her. But at 8:30 p.m., before Marin could possibly have reached Jessica's house, a beat-up blue truck pulled into Callum's driveway. His breath caught in his throat as a man stepped out tall, muscular, with tattoos covering both arms. He wore jeans and a dirty white tank top, a cigarette dangling from his lips, smoke curling into the evening air. Without hesitation, the man walked up to Callum's front door, pulled out a key, and let himself in like he owned the place without a key. The bastard had a key to his house that Callum's hands clenched in a fist so tight his nails bit into his palms. So that's him. The man who had been in his home, in his life, without his knowledge. The man who had put his hands on Ivy. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. This wasn't about his wounded pride or broken marriage. This was about Ivy's safety, about a man who had hurt his child being given free access to their home. The porch light cast long shadows as the door closed behind the intruder. Callum sat motionless in his truck, rage and betrayal washing over him in equal measure. Inside that house, his house, bought with his sweat and sacrifice, was the man who had put bruises on his daughter's arm. The man his wife had chosen over her own family. For a moment, Callum considered storming in right then. confronting this stranger in his home, demanding answers, delivering the justice his fists ached to dispense. But the rational part of his brain, the part that fixed complex engines with patience and precision, held him back. Going in hot would only make things worse. He needed to be smart, needed to think of Ivy first. Callum checked his watch. 8:35 p.m. Marin would be back with Ivy soon. He couldn't let his daughter walk into this situation. Couldn't let her see the man who had hurt her. Couldn't risk putting her in danger again. He pulled out his phone and called Marin's cell. It rang 4 times before she answered, the sound of children's voices in the background. "Cal, what's up?" she asked, sounding genuinely surprised to hear from him. "Hey, change of plans," he said, keeping his voice casual despite the rage boiling inside him. "Can you take Ivy to my mom's for the night? I might finish earlier than I thought, and I'd like to take you out. Just the 2 of us." There was a pause on the other end. "Take me out? Tonight?" "Yeah," he said, watching the windows of his house for any sign of movement. "It's been a while since we had time alone." Another pause. He could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, calculating what this meant for her plans. "I guess I could. Your mom won't mind. You know she loves having Ivy over," Callum said, tension making his voice tight despite his efforts. "Just drop her off and come home. I'll be there by 9:30. "Okay," Marin agreed too quickly. "See you soon." Callum hung up, his mind racing. Ivy would be safe at his mother's. And now he had time to figure out exactly what was going on in his house, who this man was, and what he was going to do about it. That he sat in his truck, watching his home, planning his next move. Now that Ivy was taken care of, he could focus on the betrayal unfolding before him, on the man who had waltzed into his life, hurt his child, and threatened everything he'd worked for. The porch light cast long shadows as the door closed behind Wes. Callum sat motionless in his truck, rage and betrayal washing over him in equal measure. Inside that house's house was the man who had put bruises on his daughter's arm. The man his wife's had chosen over her own family. Callum knew what he had to do now. This ended here. This ended today. Callum's first instinct was to storm into the house, fists clenched and ready. The rage pulsing through his veins demanded action, demanded that he confront the man who'd hurt his daughter. But the rational part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through 15 years of working with dangerous machinery, held him back. Storming and half-cocked would accomplish nothing. He needed evidence, proof that couldn't be denied or explained away, something concrete that would stand up in court if it came to that. Callum reached into his glove compartment and pulled out his phone. He opened the camera app, switched it to video mode, and zoomed in on his front door. The porch light illuminated the entrance clearly enough to capture what he needed. 8:42 p.m., he murmured, recording the timestamp. "Unknown male enter my house at 3487 Maple Street using a key he shouldn't have." He panned to capture the blue truck in his driveway, making sure to get a clear shot of the license plate. TXL 429. Evidence. Then he settled back to wait, camera ready. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. The house remained quiet, just a single lamp visible through the living room window. Callum checked his watch repeatedly, wondering where Marin was, hoping she'd taken Ivy to his mother's as instructed. His phone buzzed with a text. "Marin, dropped Ivy off. Be home in 15. Good. At least Ivy was safe. At 9:05 p.m., movement caught his eye. The living room curtain shifted, and Callum could see Wes moving around inside. He was carrying what looked like 2 bottles. Beer, probably. Making himself right at home. "That's right, you bastard," Callum muttered, recording every movement. "Drink up. Enjoy it while you can." At 9:18 p.m., Marin's car pulled into the driveway. Callum adjusted his position to get a better angle, capturing her as she stepped out. She'd changed clothes since he'd seen her last now, wearing a tight black dress he didn't recognize, her hair down around her shoulders. She'd put on makeup too, dark lipstick visible even in the dim light. She wasn't dressed for a casual night at home. She was dressed for a date. That Callum's grip tightened on his phone as he recorded Marin walking up to the front door. She paused before entering, checking her reflection in the window, smoothing her hair. Then she went inside. Through the window, Callum could see their reunion. Wes handed Marin a bottle of beer. She laughed at something he said, tossing her hair back in a gesture Callum had once found endearing. Now it made his stomach turn. They settled on the couch, his couch, sitting close, their bodies touching. Wes draped his arm around Marin's shoulders, pulling her against him. She didn't resist. If anything, she leaned into his touch. Jesus Christ, Callum whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper with every second of footage. For the next hour, he recorded them drinking, laughing, touching. Wes would whisper something in Marin's ear, and she'd giggle like a teenager. At one point, he grabbed her roughly, pulling her onto his lap. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him deeply to eye in the truck. Callum's jaw clenched so tight it ached. But he kept recording. Every touch, every kiss, every moment of betrayal. At 10:45 p.m., they moved from the couch. Wes grabbed another beer from the kitchen while Marin disappeared down the hallway toward the bedroom. Their bedroom. Callum's and Marin's. A minute later, the light in the bedroom window came on. Wes followed the same path Marin had taken, beer in hand, a swagger in his step. Callum stopped recording then. He didn't need to see more. Didn't want to see more. He had all the evidence he needed. For a long moment, he sat motionless in his truck, staring at the bedroom window. The urge to go in there now, to confront them, was almost overwhelming. But no, that wasn't the smart play. If he went in now, emotions high, who knew what might happen? Instead, he started his truck and drove to a motel on the edge of town. He paid cash for a room, ignored the clerk's curious look at his lack of luggage, and locked himself inside the sparse space. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he reviewed the footage he'd captured. Wes entering with a key, Marin arriving. The two of them drinking, laughing, kissing in his living room. All of it damning. All of it proof of the life she'd been living behind his back. Callum sent the video files to his email as backup, then set an alarm for 6 a.m. He didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion claimed him eventually, pulling him into a fitful rest filled with images of Wes's hands on his daughter's arm, on his wife's body. Tomorrow, he decided as consciousness slipped away. Tomorrow, this ended. Callum woke before his alarm, the motel room still dark around him. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was or why. Then it all came flooding back, the bruises on Ivy's arm, the man in his house, Marin's betrayal. He showered quickly in the lukewarm water, scrubbing away the night's sweat and grime. The face that stared back at him from the bathroom mirror looked older than it had just days ago. Lines of anger and determination etched around his eyes. 7:30 a.m., he was parked outside his mother's house. The modest one-story home where he'd grown up looked exactly as it always had: flower boxes under the windows, wind chimes on the porch, a welcome mat that had seen better days. His mother answered the door in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. "Callum? I didn't expect you so early." "Morning, Mom." He kissed her cheek. "Ivy's still asleep?" "Out like a light." She studied his face, concern creasing her brow. "You look terrible. What's going on?" "Just some things I need to take care of," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Can Ivy stay with you a little longer? Just till this afternoon?" His mother's gaze sharpened. The woman who'd raised him alone after his father walked out wasn't easily fooled. "Callum James Mercer. Where are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," he assured her, which wasn't exactly an answer. "I just need to have a conversation with Marin without Ivy around." She sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of his jaw, the same expression she'd seen countless times as he grew up. "Fine, but call me afterward, you hear? Let me know everything's okay." "I will. Promise." He squeezed her shoulder. "Tell Ivy I'll pick her up after lunch." "And Mom?" "Thanks." As he drove toward home, Callum rehearsed what he would say, how he would confront Marin with the evidence, what he would do when not if Wes was still there to... He pulled into his driveway at 8:15 a.m. The blue truck was still parked where it had been the night before. Good. He wanted to face them both. The house was quiet as he unlocked the front door. The living room showed evidence of last night's activities: empty beer bottles on the coffee table, Marin's shoes kicked off by the couch, a man's jacket thrown over the armchair. Callum moved silently through the house, his work boots barely making a sound on the carpet. The kitchen was empty, but he could hear movement down the hall. Running water. Someone was in the shower. He sat at the kitchen table and waited, his phone on the table in front of him, the damning video queued up and ready to play. 5 minutes later, Maren walked into the kitchen, humming softly. She wore an oversized t-shirt that Callum had never seen before, her hair wet from the shower. She froze when she saw him, her eyes widening in shock. "Cal!" Her hand flew to her throat. "You're home early." Callum said nothing, just watched her, noting the way her gaze darted to the hallway, then back to him. "Calculating. Always calculating. I thought you'd be at work already," she continued, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. "Do you want some coffee? I was just about to make." "Sit down, Maren," Callum interrupted, his voice cold and controlled. Something in his tone made her comply immediately. She sank into the chair across from him, hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Cal, what's going on? Where's Ivy?" "Safe." He stared at her, searching for any sign of the woman he'd married. The woman he'd trusted with his life, with his child. "Far away from here." Maren swallowed hard. "You're scaring me." "Good." Callum set his phone on the table and pressed play. "Want to explain this to me?" The video started playing, Wes using a key to enter their home. Maren's arrival. Their embrace in the living room. All color drained from Maren's face as she watched. "Cal, I can explain." "Can you?" He stopped the video, his finger hovering over the screen. "Can you explain why a stranger has a key to my house? Why he's drinking my beer? Why he's kissing my wife?" "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, the lies so blatant it was almost laughable. "It's exactly what it looks like," Callum countered. "You're cheating on me. In our home, where our daughter lives." Maren's eyes filled with tears. "Cal, I was lonely. You're always working." "Shut up." His voice cut through her excuses like a blade. "This isn't just about you screwing around. This is about Ivy." He leaned forward, closing the distance between them. "Did you know your boyfriend hurt our daughter?" Maren's face flickered with guilt, a brief flash, there and gone, but Callum caught it. She knew. She'd known and done nothing. "It wasn't that bad." She started. Callum's fist slammed into the wall beside her head, the drywall cracking under the impact. Maren flinched, shrinking back in her chair. "Not that bad?" He snarled, his control slipping for the first time. "He put bruises on her arm, Maren. He scared her so badly she's afraid to sleep without a nightlight. And you let him back into our house? Back near our daughter?" Maren shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "He didn't mean to hurt her. It was an accident." "Bullshit." Callum straightened up, disgust written across his features. "You chose him over your own child's safety. What kind of mother does that?" "You don't understand," Maren pleaded, reaching for his hand. Callum pulled away as if her touch might burn him. "I understand perfectly." "You." The sound of a door opening down the hall cut him off. Heavy footsteps approached the kitchen, accompanied by a low, masculine grumble. "Babe, where'd you put my phone?" "I need to." Wes stopped short as he entered the kitchen, his eyes landing on Callum. For a tense moment, no one moved. Wes stood in the doorway, wearing nothing but jeans, his chest bare, hair still damp from the shower. A tattoo of a snake wrapped around his right bicep, its fangs bared in a permanent snarl. Then he grinned, a slow, mocking smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, hell, guess she told you." Callum didn't hesitate. He launched himself across the kitchen, his fist connecting with Wes's jaw in a blow that sent the larger man crashing into the kitchen table. Dishes clattered to the floor, shattering on impact. "Cal, stop!" Maren screamed, jumping back from the violence. Wes recovered quickly, wiping blood from his split lip. "You son of a bitch," he growled, lunging at Callum. They collided in the middle of the kitchen, grappling for control. Wes had height and weight on his side, but Callum had 15 years of physical labor behind him, muscles hardened from lifting engines and wrestling with stubborn machinery. Wes landed a punch to Callum's ribs that knocked the wind from him. Pain flared along his side, but Callum pushed through it, grabbing Wes by the shoulders and slamming him against the refrigerator. Magnets and photos cascaded to the floor, Ivy's drawings, a school schedule, a family photo from happier times. "You think it's funny?" Callum growled, punctuating each word with a shake that rattled Wes's head against the refrigerator door. "Putting your hands on my kid? Get off me, man." Wes tried to push him away, but Callum's grip was iron. "Answer me," Callum demanded, slamming him again. "You think it's okay to hurt a 5-year-old girl? To grab her hard enough to leave bruises?" The brat spilled juice all over my new boots. Wes spat, struggling against Callum's hold. She needed to learn some respect. Something snapped inside Callum at those words. The last thread of restraint, of civilization, gave way to pure, protective rage. His fist connected with Wes's face once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Blood spurted from Wes's nose, splattering across the white refrigerator door. "Respect," Callum hissed, his voice deadly quiet. "I'll teach you about respect." He dragged Wes away from the refrigerator, throwing him into the center of the kitchen. Wes stumbled, off balance and dazed from the blows. Callum didn't give him time to recover. He followed with a punch to the solar plexus that doubled Wes over, gasping for air. "Cal, please." Marin begged from the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "You're going to kill him." "Shut up," Callum snapped, not taking his eyes off Wes. "You lost the right to ask anything of me the moment you let this piece of garbage near our daughter." Wes tried to straighten up, to fight back, but Callum was relentless. Another punch sent Wes staggering backward until his legs hit a chair and he collapsed onto it, blood streaming from his broken nose. "That's enough," Wes wheezed, holding up his hands in surrender. "I get it, man. I'll stay away from your kid." "You'll stay away from my family," Callum corrected him, standing over the bloodied man. "My house. My town, if you know what's good for you." Wes glared up at him through swelling eyes. "You think this changes anything? She doesn't want you anymore, man. She's been looking for a way out for months." Callum glanced at Marin, who shrank back under his gaze. "Is that true?" She shook her head frantically. "No, Cal, he's lying. I never." "Save it." Callum cut her off. "I don't care what you want anymore. This is about Ivy now." He turned back to Wes, who was using the hem of his jeans to wipe blood from his face. "Get up. Get your stuff. Get out of my house. My truck keys are in the bedroom," Wes muttered, struggling to stand. "Marin will get them for you," Callum said, not taking his eyes off the man. "Won't you, Marin?" She nodded quickly, disappearing down the hallway. Callum and Wes stared at each other in tense silence until she returned, holding a set of keys and a phone. "Here," she said, handing them to Wes with trembling fingers. Wes snatched them from her hand. "This is bullshit," he muttered, wincing as he touched his broken nose. "You're crazy, man. Both of you." "Get out," Callum repeated, stepping aside to clear a path to the door. Wes limped toward the exit, favoring his left side where Callum's blows had connected with his ribs. At the door, he paused, looking back at Marin. "You coming?" Her eyes darted between Wes and Callum, indecision written across her face. "Make your choice, Marin," Callum said quietly. "But understand this, if you walk out that door with him, you're giving up any claim to Ivy. I will fight you in court until there's nothing left of either of us, and I will win." Tears spilled down Marin's cheeks. "Cal, please." "Choose," he repeated, unmoved by her tears. After a long, tense moment, Marin shook her head. "I can't go with you, Wes." Anger flashed across Wes's battered face. "After everything I did for you? You're choosing him." "I'm choosing my daughter," Marin whispered, not looking at either man. Wes spat on the floor, a glob of bloody saliva landing on the linoleum. "Whatever. You're not worth this shit anyway." He stalked out, slamming the door behind him. Through the kitchen window, Callum watched Wes climb into his truck, his movements stiff and pained. The engine roared to life, and the blue truck peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing on the pavement. When he turned back to Marin, his eyes were cold. "Don't think this means we're okay." She nodded, wiping away tears. "I know. I couldn't leave Ivy." "You already did," Callum said, his voice flat. "The moment you let that man near her, you left her." Marin sank into a chair, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "What happens now?" Callum looked around the kitchen at the broken dishes, the blood on his refrigerator, the shattered remains of the life they'd built together. "Now," he said, his eyes narrowing, "I'm not done with you yet." Marin trembled at his words, suddenly realizing this was just the beginning. "Cal, Please, she begged, reaching for him. We can work this out. For Ivy's sake. Don't, he cut her off, stepping away from her touch. Don't you dare use her name. Not after what you did. What are you going to do? She whispered, fear creeping in her voice that Callum's expression was carved from stone. Whatever it takes to protect my daughter. Starting now. We turned back to Marin, his eyes were cold. Don't think this means we're okay. She nodded, wiping away tears. I know. I couldn't leave Ivy. You already did, Callum said, his voice flat. The moment you let that man near her, you left her. Marin sank into a chair, her shoulders slumped in defeat. What happens now? Callum looked around the kitchen at the broken dishes, the blood on his refrigerator, the shattered remains of the life they'd built together. Now, he said, his voice hard with determination, I'm not done with you yet. Marin's face crumpled as the full weight of his words crashed down on her. She made the biggest mistake of her life, and from the look in Callum's eyes, there would be no forgiveness. No second chances, just consequences. The kitchen still smelled of blood and rage. Broken glass glittered on the linoleum floor like scattered diamonds. Wes lay slumped against the wall, groaning in pain, his face a mess of blood and swelling bruises. Marin stood frozen by the refrigerator, her makeup streaked by tears, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Callum stepped over the broken chair, moving deliberately to the counter where his phone lay. The adrenaline that had fueled his attack on Wes was subsiding, replaced by a cold, calculated anger that focused his mind with crystal clarity. What are you doing? Marin asked, her voice rising as she watched him pick up the phone. Callum looked up, his expression hard. Well, I should have done the moment Ivy showed me those bruises. Cal, no. Marin moved toward him, panic flashing in her eyes. You can't. Watch me. He held her gaze as he began to dial that a smirk crossed Marin's face, an unexpected reaction that caught Callum off guard. What are you going to say? That you beat up my boyfriend? The question hung in the air between them, a pathetic attempt at leverage. Callum felt a cold smile form on his lips. No. His finger hovered over the speakerphone button. I'm reporting child abuse. The smirk vanished from Marin's face, replaced by something Callum had never seen there before, pure, unadulterated fear. Her face went pale, the blood draining away so rapidly he thought she might faint. Cal, you can't. They'll take Ivy from you. Callum's finger pressed down, activating the speaker. That's the idea. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Martinez speaking. Martinez, it's Callum Mercer. I need to speak with Sheriff Owens. It's urgent. A pause. He's here, Callum. One moment. Marin lunged across the kitchen, her hands reaching for the phone. Hang up, please. Callum stepped back, keeping the device out of her reach. Too late, Marin. You made your choice. Now live with it. Callum. Sheriff Owens' gruff voice came through the speaker. What's going on, son? Sheriff, I need you to come to my house. 3487 Maple Street. Callum kept his eyes fixed on Marin, who had collapsed back against the counter, her head in her hands. I need to report a child abuse case. Your daughter? The sheriff's voice sharpened with concern. Yes, sir. And I have evidence. Photos, videos, everything you'll need. Stay where you are. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Callum placed the phone on the counter, the silence in the kitchen broken only by Wes's pained breathing. Marin stared at Callum, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. You've ruined everything, she whispered. No, Marin. Callum shook his head slowly. You did that all on your own. From the floor, Wes let out a bitter laugh that ended in a cough. You think you've won? This ain't over, man. Callum turned his cold gaze to the battered man. For you it is. With your record, you'll be lucky to see daylight in 5 years. Bullshit, Wes spat, wincing as he tried to straighten up. It's my word against yours. No. Callum moved to the kitchen table where the folders of evidence lay neatly organized. It's your word against Ivy's testimony, the photos of her bruises, and the video of you admitting you grabbed her. Wes's eyes widened. You're bluffing. There's no video. Want to bet your freedom on that? Callum asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Marin pushed away from the counter, panic driving her movements. I need to get out of here. I can't be here when they come. You're not going anywhere. Callum moved to block the doorway. You're going to face what you did. Both of you. I hate you. She spat, the words venomous. Better that than having you love me, apparently. Callum's reply was cold, devoid of emotion. For 10 tense minutes, they remained in a silent standoff, Callum by the doorway, Marin at the counter, Wes slumped against the wall, occasionally spitting blood onto the floor. The distant wail of sirens broke the silence, growing louder until red and blue lights flashed through the kitchen windows. Marin's shoulders slumped in defeat. This can't be happening. It is, Callum replied. Time's up. Sheriff Owens arrived with 2 deputies, their patrol cars parked at angles in Callum's driveway. The sheriff himself was a tall man with silver hair and a weathered face that had seen 40 years of service. He'd known Callum since he was a boy, had watched him grow from a troubled teen into a solid man. Callum. Owens nodded grimly as he entered the kitchen, his experienced eyes taking in the broken glass, the blood-stained floor, the clear evidence of a struggle. Quite a mess you've got here. Not as bad as it looks, Callum replied, stepping aside to let the sheriff into. Owens's eyes landed on Wes, who was still groaning on the floor, blood crusted around his nose and mouth. I see you two had a disagreement. You could say that. Callum moved to the counter where he'd placed a folder evidence compiled with methodical precision over the past 2 days. Sheriff, I need to report a crime. I can see there's been some violence here, Owens noted, gesturing for one of the deputies to check on Wes. Want to tell me what happened? Callum opened the folder, sliding a printed photo across the counter to Owens. It showed Ivy's small arm, the bruises clearly visible. My daughter Ivy told me 2 days ago that a man who comes to our house when I'm at work grabbed her because she spilled juice. She also told me that Marin had said she was getting a new daddy. Owens studied the photo, his expression hardening. Go on. I didn't confront Marin immediately. I wanted proof. Callum pulled out his phone, queuing up the video he'd taken. Last night, I told Marin I had to work late. Instead, I watched the house. He pressed play, showing Owens the footage of Wes entering the house with a key, followed by Marin arriving later. That's Weston Grady, Owens said, recognizing the man immediately. He's on parole. I know. Callum nodded. I did some research. Multiple arrests for assault, violation of a restraining order. And now he's put his hands on my daughter. Marin stood by the refrigerator, arms wrapped around herself. This is ridiculous. You can't just. Be quiet, Mrs. Mercer, Owens commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marin fell silent, her eyes wild with fear. Callum continued, his voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath. I confronted Marin this morning with the evidence. While we were talking, Grady came out of our bedroom. He hesitated, glancing at his bruised knuckles. There was an altercation. I can see that, Owens commented dryly. Did Grady admit to hurting Ivy? Yes. Callum pulled out another document, a printout of Wes's criminal record. Said she needed to learn some respect because she spilled juice on his boots. Owens' face darkened as he read the rap sheet. And you, Mrs. Mercer? What do you have to say about all this? Marin's mascara had left black trails down her cheeks, her hands twisted together in her lap. It wasn't like that. Wes has a temper, but he didn't mean to hurt Ivy. It was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Callum's voice was ice. You knew he hurt her, and you let him back into our house. Back near our daughter. I didn't know how bad it was. Marin protested, her voice rising. Ivy never told me he grabbed her that hard. So you admit you knew he put his hands on her? Owens asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Marin's eyes darted between the sheriff and Callum, realizing too late the trap she'd walked into. That's not what I meant. Where's Ivy now? Owens asked, turning back to Callum. Safe with my mother. I took her there last night before confronting Marin. The sheriff nodded, seemingly satisfied with Callum's protective instincts. We'll need to talk to her, get a statement. But we can do that with a child psychologist present. No need to traumatize her further. Thank you, Callum said, relief evident in his voice. Owens turned back to Wes, who was now sitting upright. A deputy crouched beside him. "You able to stand, Grady?" "Go to hell," Wes muttered, spitting blood onto Callum's kitchen floor. "I'll take that as a yes." Owens nodded to the deputy, who helped Wes to his feet. "Weston Grady, you're under arrest for assault on a minor and trespassing." "What?" Wes jerked in the deputy's grasp. "You can't." "I can and I am." Owens recited the Miranda rights while the deputy handcuffed Wes, who continued to protest through his swollen lips. Then Owens turned to Marin, his expression grim. "Marin Mercer, you're under arrest for child endangerment." "What?" Marin's voice rose to a shriek. "You can't." "I can and I am." Owens signaled to the remaining deputy. "You knowingly allowed a violent offender access to your child after he had physically harmed her. That's textbook child endangerment in the state of Texas." The deputy stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Please stand up and place your hands behind your back, ma'am." "Callum." Marin turned to him, pleading. "Don't do this." Callum watched impassively as the deputy recited Miranda rights and secured the handcuffs around Marin's wrists. Her screams echoed through the house as they led her outside to the waiting patrol car. "You're making a mistake. I'm her mother." "Callum, don't do this." Callum didn't say a damn word as they took them both away. He stood in the doorway, watching as they helped Marin into the back of one cruiser and Wes, still groaning in pain, into another. Once, the sight might have broken his heart. Now, he felt nothing but a cold certainty that justice was being served. Sheriff Owens remained behind, gathering the evidence Callum had provided. "I want you to come down to the station later today, give a formal statement." "I'll be there," Callum agreed. "After I pick up Ivy from my mother's." "Good." Owens clasped his shoulder. "And, Callum, you did the right thing. That little girl is lucky to have you." As the patrol cars pulled away, their sirens wailing in the morning air, Callum stood on his front porch watching until they disappeared around the corner. Only then did he allow himself to take a deep breath, the weight of the morning's events settling on his shoulders. IT was over. And yet it was just beginning. The Jefferson County Courthouse stood imposingly at the center of town, its red brick facade and white columns a testament to small-town justice. Callum straightened his tie, a rare accessory he usually reserved for weddings and funerals, as he climbed the worn stone steps beside his lawyer, Michael Burke. "Remember," Burke murmured, his briefcase swinging at his side, "let me do most of the talking. No matter what Marin or her lawyer says, keep your cool." "I know." Callum nodded, his eyes fixed on the heavy wooden doors ahead. "Just give me full custody of Ivy. With the evidence we have, I'm confident we will. But be prepared, these hearings can get ugly." Inside, the courtroom was already half full when they entered, mostly strangers there for other cases. But Callum spotted his mother in the front row, her face lined with worry and determination in equal measure. She'd been his rock through all of this, taking Ivy whenever he had to work or meet with lawyers, shielding the little girl from the worst of the upheaval. Marin sat at the opposite table with her court-appointed attorney, a young woman who looked overwhelmed by the case. After 6 weeks in county jail awaiting her hearing, Marin had lost weight, her prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on her frame, dark circles under her eyes. She attempted a smile when she saw Callum, but he looked right through her as he took his seat. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Hayes," the bailiff announced, and the rustling of movement filled the courtroom. Judge Hayes was a formidable woman in her 60s, her silver hair cut in a no-nonsense bob, her eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. She took her seat, surveyed the courtroom, and nodded. "Be seated." The proceedings began with formal introductions. Burke presented their petition for sole custody, outlining the circumstances that had led to this day. "Your Honor," he said, his voice confident, "the evidence will show that Marin Mercer knowingly endangered her 5-year-old daughter by allowing a violent offender access to their home after he had physically abused the child." Marin's attorney rose. "Your Honor, Ms. Mercer acknowledges her lapse in judgment, but maintains that she never intended to put her daughter at risk. She loves Ivy deeply and is committed to rebuilding their relationship in a safe, supervised environment." Judge Hayes nodded, her expression neutral. "I'll hear the evidence." What followed was a methodical dismantling of Marin's fitness as a mother. Burke presented the police report, the photos of Ivy's bruises, and a recording Callum had made of Ivy describing what happened. "Daddy, the man who comes over grabbed my arm really hard when I spilled juice." Ivy's small voice filled the courtroom from the recorder. "It hurted." Marin broke down at the sound, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Her attorney placed a comforting hand on her arm, but the damage was done. The recording continued, with Ivy explaining how Marin had told her she might get a new daddy soon. Burke followed with testimony from Sheriff Owens about Wes's criminal record and the circumstances of the arrests. He called the Child Protective Services worker who had interviewed Ivy, who confirmed the child account and expressed concern about Marin's significant lack of protective capacity. Finally, he called Callum to the stand. After being sworn in, Callum sat straight back in the witness chair, his hands resting on his thighs. He answered Burke's questions calmly, describing the day Ivy showed him the bruises, the evidence he'd gathered, and the confrontation that followed. And at any point, Burke asked, did Marin express concern about Weston Grady's treatment of her daughter? No, Callum replied firmly. When I confronted her with the bruises, she tried to claim Ivy had fallen. When I presented the video evidence of Grady entering our home, she begged me not to call the police. Her concern was for him, not for Ivy. Marin's attorney cross-examined him, trying to paint him as controlling and vindictive. Isn't it true, Mr. Mercer, that you assaulted Mr. Grady before calling the police? Yes, Callum admitted without hesitation. When he appeared in my kitchen and made comments about hurting my daughter, I acted to protect her by beating him so severely he required medical attention. Callum met the attorney's gaze steadily. By ensuring he understood he would never touch my daughter again, the attorney tried another angle. And isn't it true that you've been deliberately keeping Ivy from her mother during this legal process? I've followed the court's temporary custody orders to the letter, Callum replied calmly. And yes, I've refused to allow unauthorized visits with the woman who chose her boyfriend over our daughter's safety. When Marin took the stand, her testimony was a tearful blend of excuses and promises. She claimed she hadn't known the extent of Wes's violence, that she'd been manipulated by him, that she'd made a terrible mistake she would never repeat. I love my daughter more than anything, she pleaded, looking directly at Callum rather than the judge. I made one awful mistake. Please don't take her away from me forever. Burke's cross-examination was surgical in its precision. Ms. Mercer, did you or did you not give Weston Grady a key to the home where your 5-year-old daughter lived? Yes, but... And did you or did you not continue to allow him into that home after you knew he had grabbed your daughter hard enough to leave bruises? I didn't think. It's a yes or no question. Ms. Mercer. Marin's shoulders slumped. Yes. And when Mr. Mercer confronted you with evidence of Mr. Grady's abuse, did you immediately express concern for your daughter's safety? Not exactly, but again, Ms. Mercer, yes or no? A whispered no. No further questions, Your Honor. After closing arguments, Judge Hayes took only 15 minutes to render her decision. She returned to the bench, her expression grave as she addressed the courtroom. In matters of child custody, this court is guided by one principle above all others, the best interest of the child. She looked directly at Marin. Ms. Mercer, while I believe you love your daughter, love alone is not enough. Parents must protect their children from harm, not invite it into their homes. Marin began to cry softly, seeming to sense what was coming. The evidence presented today shows a pattern of choices that prioritize your relationship with a violent offender over your daughter's safety and well-being. Judge Hayes shuffled the papers before her. Therefore, I am granting Mr. Mercer's petition for sole legal and physical custody of Ivy Mercer. Ms. Mercer's parental rights are hereby terminated. A gasp escaped Marin's lips, followed by a wail of distress. No, you can't do this. Order, Judge Hayes commanded, banging her gavel. When silence returned, she continued, Ms. Mercer, this court does not make such decisions lightly. However, your actions demonstrated a profound failure to protect your child from known harm. The law is clear in such cases. She turned to Callum. Mr. Mercer, the court recognizes your commitment to your daughter's safety and well-being. You are granted full custody with all legal rights and responsibilities that entails. Thank you, Your Honor, Callum said, relief washing over him as the judge rose and left the courtroom. Marin collapsed against her attorney, sobbing openly now. Please, there has to be something we can do. An appeal. Her attorney shook her head, already gathering her papers. I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer. With the evidence presented, an appeal would likely fail. Callum felt no satisfaction in Marin's pain, only a weary resolution that he'd done what was necessary to protect his daughter. He stood to embrace his mother, who had tears in her eyes. It's over, Mom, he said quietly. She's safe. You did good, son, she whispered, patting his cheek as she had when he was at as they prepared to leave. Marin broke away from her attorney, rushing toward them. Callum, please. You can't do this. She needs her mother. The bailiff moved to intercept her, but Callum held up a hand. It's okay. He faced Marin directly for the first time since the hearing began. You should have thought of that before you let him hurt her. I'll change, Marin promised desperately. I'll do whatever it takes. Please don't keep her from me. I'm not keeping her from you, Callum replied, his voice steady. The court did that, and you did it to yourself. He turned away. Let's go, Mom. As they walked out of the courthouse into the bright Texas sunshine, Callum felt a weight lift from his shoulders. There would be challenges ahead explaining to Ivy why her mother couldn't see her anymore, building a new life for just the two of them, navigating the complicated waters of single fatherhood. But Ivy was safe, and that made everything else manageable. Months later, Callum and Ivy were settled in their new home. Far from their old neighborhood, far from the memories that haunted them, they had started fresh. A small house with a yard where Ivy could play, a new school where no one knew their story, a chance to rebuild without the shadows of the past. Ivy was happy, free of fear, and surrounded by love. The nightmares that had plagued her in the weeks following the arrests had faded. She rarely asked about Marin anymore, and when she did, Callum answered honestly, but simply. Mommy made bad choices, and now she can't be with us anymore. Marin had spent 6 months in jail for child endangerment. Upon release, she'd found herself in a world that had moved on without her. The diner had fired her. No one else in town would hire her once they learned why she'd been arrested. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Neighbors who had once smiled and waved now closed their doors when they saw her coming. Homeless, broke, and completely alone, she tried reaching out to Callum, begging for another chance, for just a glimpse of Ivy. Her calls went straight to voicemail. Her letters were returned unopened. Her attempts to see them at the grocery store or park were met with Callum's back as he guided Ivy away. Every door had slammed in her face, and the one that mattered most, the door to her daughter's life, remained firmly shut. Wes? He had received 5 years for child assault and breaking parole. Behind bars, unable to hurt Ivy or anyone else's child, he had already faded from their lives like a bad dream upon waking. Tonight, as the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Callum sat on the porch swing, watching Ivy play in the yard. Her laughter carried on the evening breeze, a sound that never failed to heal something broken inside him. Daddy, look, she called, pointing to a butterfly that had landed on a rose bush he'd planted when they first moved in. It's so pretty. Sure as Princess, he called back, smiling as she crept closer to the insect, her movements exaggeratedly slow and careful. Ivy giggled as the butterfly took flight, then ran back to the porch, climbing onto the swing beside him. The old wooden frame creaked gently as they set in motion, back and forth in a soothing rhythm. Daddy. Ivy's voice was thoughtful as she leaned against his arm. Yes, Princess. Remember when you promised you wouldn't leave me? At the park that day. Callum's heart squeezed at the memory of the day that had changed everything, set them on this path. I remember. Ivy giggled, hugging his arm. You were right, Daddy. You never left me. Callum bent down, pressing a kiss to her forehead, breathing in the scent of sunshine and strawberry shampoo. Never will, sweetheart. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in deepening shades of purple and gold, Callum held his daughter close, grateful for the second chance they'd been given. The cost of betrayal had been high. A marriage destroyed, a family fractured, lives forever altered. But sitting here with Ivy, safe and happy beside him, Callum knew it had been worth every painful moment. Some prices had to be paid to protect what mattered most. And nothing in this world mattered more than the little girl beside him, watching the sunset with trust in her eyes and love in her heart.